Imagine yourself sitting quietly, as if you were simply the space in which thoughts appear. The awareness illusion theory suggests that what you call your awareness is not a personal possession, but more like a lantern, shifting its beam over passing sensations and memories. In the dim corners of your mind, ideas form, dissolve, and reform without any true owner observing them. Consider the way a candle's glow spreads across a table. It illuminates whatever happens to be placed before it, but the light itself does not choose. In daily life, this perspective might feel unsettling at first. You pour water into a cup, you taste the cool liquid, you watch your own hand moving. And yet, according to this theory, there is no little observer perched behind your eyes deciding to be aware. There is only the process of noticing, arising from countless causes: biology, culture, the language you learned, the memories you absorbed over time. Awareness becomes less like a central witness and more like an incidental phenomenon, the natural effect of complex interactions. In ancient philosophies, there are echoes of this idea. Early Buddhist texts describe consciousness as a series of flickering moments, each one dependent on conditions and none lasting more than a heartbeat. Similarly, some Greek thinkers imagined perception as the meeting point between the senses and an impersonal force of knowing, not something belonging to any self. Imagine yourself in a quiet library, the air thick with the scent of old pages. When you reach for a book, the sensation of the cover against your fingertips is vivid. But the awareness illusion theory would say that this vividness doesn't require a you behind it. It simply arises, like a wave cresting on the surface of the sea. And just as waves do not own the ocean, thoughts and perceptions do not belong to an enduring observer. As you let this idea drift through your mind, notice how it softens the edges of self-importance. You are not the custodian of awareness, but perhaps only a temporary pattern, appearing and vanishing within the quiet expanse of experience. Is this conversation helpful so far? Imagine yourself sitting in a quiet room with no mirrors on the walls. A single, unremarkable mask rests on a plain wooden table. It looks harmless, even familiar, like something you'd expect at a festival. But if you study it carefully, you sense a deeper purpose. This mask is not for celebration. It is the face your mind wears to move safely through the world. Philosophers across centuries have wondered whether your personality is merely this mask, an elaborate collection of habits, memories, and roles that feels solid only because you keep looking through it. Imagine a monk in early dawn light, sitting still while thoughts drift by like clouds. Each thought claims to be real, but none remain. Your name, your preferences, your beliefs, they are like threads woven into this covering. Over time, you forget the weaving and see only the surface. The mask grows comfortable. It reassures you that you are someone specific, someone certain. But if you gently peel it away, if you stop identifying with each story, you may find nothing behind it but quiet awareness. Some traditions call this emptiness liberation. Others find it unsettling, as though behind every thought there is only a silent witness who never speaks. Imagine yourself breathing into that space. No labels, no commentary. Just a soft, impartial presence that has watched every moment unfold. In this stillness, nothing screams more than silence. And perhaps that is the truest part of you, the observer who wears each mask for a while, then sets it down without regret. Imagine yourself sitting quietly, your thoughts drifting like slow clouds. You notice a single idea rising, perhaps the awareness of your own breathing. As you turn your attention to it, something subtle unfolds. The thought itself seems to be observing you. It is as if your awareness looks into a mirror and finds another mirror looking back. This is sometimes called the recursive observer trap. Philosophers have long wondered, if you can observe yourself thinking, who is the final observer? Ancient meditative traditions describe the mind as a series of watchers, each aware of the last, never arriving at a single witness. In early European philosophy, thinkers like Descartes struggled to define this. He wrote of the certainty of self, yet could not explain why observing awareness seemed to multiply into layers. If you notice a thought, and then notice yourself noticing it, the process has no clear end. Modern neuroscience also explores this puzzle. Studies show the brain has networks for self-reflection. One set of regions lights up when you think about yourself, and others activate when you reflect on that awareness. Each step is like a soft echo. Yet no instrument finds the final source. As you rest here, you might sense a quiet vertigo, a feeling of peering into an endless depth. But there is comfort in this uncertainty. If consciousness is a hall of mirrors, perhaps it does not need a single center. Let your mind drift gently. Imagine each thought as a lantern in the dusk. As you watch them glow, perhaps another presence is observing you in return. Imagine yourself in a dim room, the air faintly warmed by your own breathing. You open your eyes, finding the ceiling familiar, yet somehow uncertain. For a moment, you pause. Did you truly wake, or are you still folded inside another dream? Throughout history, this confusion has quietly unsettled thinkers. The Chinese philosopher Zhuangzi once dreamed he was a butterfly drifting on a breeze. When he awoke, he could not tell if he had been a man dreaming of a butterfly or a butterfly dreaming of a man. This gentle puzzle has remained, a soft echo in countless minds. You may have known a morning when the rhythm of the clock felt too precise, the floor too cool beneath your feet. In that moment, you searched for proof that you were awake. The weight of your body, the scrape of the chair leg, the taste of water. Each sensation became a small reassurance. Yet dreams can be as vivid as any waking moment. In quiet studies, researchers have collected accounts of dreams so convincing that people later struggled to decide if an event had truly happened. The mind, it seems, easily weaves a world complete with memory and sensation. Consider how memory itself behaves like a dream, softened by time, colored by desire, and reshaped each time it returns. If something feels real, does it matter that it began in sleep? Perhaps it is natural to wonder which reality holds you. To question is to glimpse the delicate edges where one world blurs into the next. And if tonight you close your eyes and drift once more, you may find comfort in knowing that you are not alone in this quiet uncertainty. Imagine yourself drifting into sleep. Your breathing slows. Muscles loosen their hold on your bones. The world softens around the edges. But somewhere in that quiet, a small, silent watcher remains awake. Even as your thoughts blur and dissolve, something notices the darkness arriving. This awareness doesn't announce itself. It has no voice. Yet it is always there, observing without judgment, recording without effort. Long before modern neuroscience mapped the phases of sleep, philosophers in ancient Greece wondered about this hidden observer. Aristotle believed sleep was a retreat of the senses, a necessary pause, but he also sensed that a part of the soul remained alert. In India's Upanishads, there are verses that describe a spark of consciousness that never flickers out. They called it the witness, the part of you that watches dreams unfold like drifting clouds but never falls asleep itself. Imagine yourself, centuries ago, a traveler in a quiet monastery. The halls smell faintly of beeswax and old parchment. At night, monks would lie on narrow wooden cots, their bodies exhausted from hours of prayer. Yet they wrote about an inner lamp that stayed alight when all else darkened. A presence behind the eyes that waited patiently for morning. Modern scientists have traced fragments of this vigilance to the brainstem, to circuits that maintain awareness even in the depths of rest. But biology doesn't fully explain the mystery of why you can watch yourself dream or sense time slipping by when you're meant to be absent. Picture this gentle paradox, your reflection in a dark window. You turn away, thinking it disappears. But if you look again, it's still there, unchanged, watching with quiet patience. So tonight, as you close your eyes and the rhythm of your breath becomes steady, remember, the reflection doesn't sleep. It waits without hurry, a silent witness to each thought that rises and falls. And perhaps it is waiting for nothing at all, only to remind you that a part of you has always been awake. Imagine yourself sitting in a still room, perhaps with the soft ticking of a clock marking each passing moment. You feel your thoughts as if they are yours alone, deliberate, chosen, the product of some essential you. But according to the idea sometimes called the biochemical puppet show, this feeling of authorship may be more illusion than fact. Beneath your calm reflection or sudden inspiration, tiny chemical messengers drift and spark, carrying signals that shape every thought before it even emerges into awareness. Picture dopamine, often called the molecule of desire, flowing through your brain in pulses you cannot detect. When it rises, you feel curiosity, anticipation, or pleasure. When it falls, the world dims, and even familiar joys feel distant. Or serotonin, the chemical that steadies mood and softens anxiety. Its presence or absence can tint all perception, like colored glass laid over a lantern's flame. In the rhythm of ordinary life, these substances choreograph your decisions in subtle ways. You might imagine that you choose to reach for a sweet piece of fruit, but long before you feel that impulse, dopamine pathways have already signaled the reward. A serene afternoon spent reading may owe its ease to serotonin levels that keep restlessness away. Imagine yourself walking slowly along a garden path at dusk. The air is cool, the scent of damp earth rising around you. Every sensation you savor is threaded through with neurotransmitters, their quiet work as vital as breath. If you could peer inside your mind at any instant, you would see a shimmering interplay of chemical signals, tiny actors on a hidden stage. Some ancient thinkers suspected that the mind was ruled by humors or vapors, drifting invisibly. Today, science has replaced humors with neurotransmitters, but the central mystery remains. Do these substances merely transmit your thoughts, or do they create them entirely? When a wave of serotonin surges, is that you feeling content, or are you simply watching the biochemical puppet show unfold, unable to tell where chemistry ends and self begins? Imagine yourself in a quiet study lined with books, their spines faded by time. A small radio sits on a shelf, humming with static. You turn its dial, and suddenly, a voice emerges, clear and composed. For a moment, it feels as though the radio itself is thinking, shaping each sentence. But you know it's only receiving a signal broadcast from somewhere unseen. Some philosophers and neuroscientists have wondered if your consciousness works the same way. What if the brain isn't a generator of thoughts, but a receiver, tuning in to a field of awareness beyond individual minds? This idea has appeared in many cultures. Ancient mystics described intuition as a kind of transmission, arriving fully formed. Modern theories sometimes echo this, suggesting that consciousness could be a frequency your mind decodes. Imagine yourself sitting still, breathing slowly. A thought appears, unannounced. You might believe it was created inside your skull, sparked by cells and chemicals. But if you look closer, there is no clear moment when a thought is born. It simply arrives, like a signal caught by a hidden antenna. Some traditions say this explains why inspiration feels sudden, as if you are remembering rather than inventing. Artists speak of ideas descending like soft rain, impossible to force. In quiet moments, you may sense that your awareness is part of something larger, a shared current flowing through every life. Consider how this perspective softens the edges of identity. If thoughts are signals, not possessions, then you are less the author of your mind and more the space where thoughts are heard. And in that space, there is a quiet freedom, a recognition that consciousness does not end at the border of your brain, but stretches into the unknown. Imagine yourself sitting in a quiet room where the only sound is the soft rhythm of your breath. You feel like the same person you were a moment ago, and perhaps the same as yesterday, last year, or even in childhood. But beneath this familiar feeling, philosophers suggest something stranger. What if there is no continuous you, only a series of brief selves, each lasting for a flicker of time before giving way to the next? This idea is sometimes called the traveling self-illusion. It proposes that the mind creates a smooth story of identity by stitching together countless moments of experience. Like lanterns hung in a line, each moment glows for an instant, then disappears, leaving only a memory of light. Early Buddhist thinkers described this with the word anatta, the notion of not self. They believed that consciousness was not a solid core, but more like a river, always moving, never the same, twice. European philosophers later reached similar ideas. David Hume called the self a bundle of perceptions loosely tied together by habit and memory. Today, neuroscience finds hints of this in the brain's activity. Scans reveal that perception, emotion, and memory arise in pulses, each lasting just fractions of a second. What feels like an unbroken identity is, in fact, a rhythm of moments flowing in sequence. As you reflect on this, notice the stillness around you. Perhaps you can sense the gentle arising and fading of each thought. Imagine your awareness as a path of soft footsteps in fresh snow, each one clear and temporary. And if the self is only a trail of shadows, maybe there is a kind of freedom in knowing that nothing has to stay the same. Let yourself drift calmly in this idea, the thought of being renewed again and again, moment by moment. Imagine yourself moving through your day. Your hands lift a cup of water, your feet carry you across the room. Each action feels deliberate, as though a small voice inside quietly commands your limbs. But pause for a moment. Consider the possibility that your sense of control is only an illusion, a carefully designed interface for something watching from elsewhere. Throughout history, people have wondered if consciousness is like a puppet's thread, tied to forces they cannot see. Ancient philosophers spoke of fate as an invisible hand guiding every step. Today, some scientists explore whether our world could be a simulation, crafted with such detail that we mistake it for reality. You might recall a moment when your body felt strangely separate from your thoughts, as if you were observing yourself from a distance. Perhaps during illness or exhaustion, you noticed a soft delay between intention and motion. In those moments, it can seem as though you are only inhabiting a vessel you don't entirely own. Researchers studying virtual reality have found that people adapt quickly to controlling artificial avatars. Even when their real bodies remain still, their minds accept a digital form as their own. The boundary between self and simulation becomes porous, easier to cross than most imagine. If your experiences can be copied, if your memories can be shaped by code, you might wonder what remains truly yours. Maybe the voice that feels like your own is simply the program speaking through you. Or perhaps the sense of being a character is a hint, a reminder that awareness itself could be a layered construction. As you drift into rest, consider this gentle uncertainty, the idea that you are both the observer and the observed, the player and the played. And if tonight you find yourself questioning whether you are the author of your choices or just an echo in someone else's story, you are not alone in that quiet wondering. Imagine yourself in a quiet room where the walls are smooth and pale, humming with a hidden current. In the center of this space rests a sealed vessel, opaque, silent, the size of a small trunk. Inside it, a brain floats, warm and alive, connected to delicate threads of wiring. No eyes to see, no ears to hear, no skin to touch the air. And yet, signals flow across each folded surface, carrying sensations that seem real. This thought experiment began centuries ago, evolving from early philosophers who questioned the trustworthiness of the senses. Descartes imagined a malicious demon feeding illusions to the mind. Later, in the 20th century, scientists and writers proposed a similar image, a brain, disconnected from a body, receiving artificial input so precise it could never detect the difference. Picture a machine programmed to send perfect replicas of every sight, sound, and memory. The brain believes it walks along a garden path. It feels the warmth of the sun and the softness of grass underfoot. It has no reason to doubt this gentle world, because it cannot compare it to anything else. The rhythm of this hidden life unfolds like any other. Thoughts drift by. Emotions rise and fade. But what anchors them? If all input can be fabricated, then consciousness itself seems to float free of any fixed reality. Imagine yourself standing near that wall, listening to the quiet hum of the machinery. You might wonder whether your own senses are any more reliable. Perhaps the walls around you, the air you breathe, even the passage of time are only precise layers of simulation, woven together so seamlessly that questioning them feels absurd. And yet, the fact that you can wonder at all is its own small proof of something, some capacity to question the data you receive. Tonight, as your thoughts grow soft and the rhythm of your breath slows, consider this. If all experience can be simulated, what does it mean to be real? And what exactly is your consciousness tethered to? Imagine yourself in a quiet room, a place where your mind can wander without interruption. You notice a thought emerging, perhaps a memory of childhood or a question about tomorrow's tasks. It seems spontaneous, as if it arrived unannounced. This is the heart of the thought generator problem, the observation that you do not truly summon your thoughts. They arise on their own, like ripples moving across a still pond. In daily life, this can be easy to overlook. You feel as though you are the thinker, the one in control. Yet when you pause to watch carefully, it becomes clear that thoughts appear with no deliberate signal. You don't decide to recall an old melody or imagine a distant place. The content simply materializes in consciousness. Imagine yourself sitting by a fire, the warmth seeping into your hands. As you gaze into the flames, reflections float up, plans, regrets, stray images. According to some philosophers and neuroscientists, this unbidden procession suggests that consciousness itself is the illusion of authorship. The mind attributes ownership to thoughts, stitching together a story of self to explain what is happening. But perhaps, in reality, there is no single author at all, only the machinery of cognition producing ideas, moment after moment. In ancient India, early contemplatives noticed this same puzzle. They spoke of the mind as a stream, never still, never commanded by a single will. In more recent centuries, psychologists have described consciousness as a narrator that retroactively claims credit for decisions already made by unconscious processes. As you let this idea drift across your awareness, consider the possibility that your sense of control is a comforting story. The mind prefers to believe in a pilot at the controls, rather than admit it is carried by currents it cannot see. Like a theater that stages a play without actors, thoughts may unfold without a true thinker. You are the witness, perhaps, but not the origin. In this quiet, you can feel each thought as it rises, lingers, and dissolves, untouched by any author's hand. Imagine yourself in a dim room, the air thick with the scent of old paper. A delicate machine hums on a wooden desk. It doesn't wait for instructions, it's always running, quietly generating predictions about what should happen next. Some scientists believe your brain works the same way. Rather than passively receiving reality, your mind builds a model of the world in advance. It guesses what you're about to see, hear, and feel before any signal arrives. Each moment, countless tiny predictions flicker beneath awareness, anticipating the color of the sky, the weight of your steps, the sound of a voice calling your name. When reality reaches your senses, your brain compares its guesses to the incoming data. The small differences, errors between expectation and fact, are quickly corrected. What you experience as the vivid present may be only this process of adjustment, like an editor revising a draft. Imagine yourself walking through a familiar hallway. You don't notice each detail consciously because your brain predicts most of them. Only when something unexpected appears, a sudden movement or a new scent, does awareness sharpen. In this view, consciousness could be just the feeling of prediction failing, the mind updating itself. Some philosophers suggest that what you call experience is really post-processing, a reconstruction assembled a fraction of a second after the world has already moved on. If this is true, then awareness is not a clear window onto reality, but a careful illusion, an error correction system that keeps you oriented. Consider for a moment How this perspective shifts your sense of self. If your mind is a prediction machine, then certainty is always provisional, built on guesses. And in that quiet uncertainty, you may glimpse the humble origin of consciousness itself. Imagine yourself resting quietly, with your eyes closed, feeling the gentle rhythm of your breath. In this darkness, there is a space that seems familiar, a sense of being you. Yet, when you try to look directly at it, it slips away. This is sometimes called the black box self. The idea that consciousness, the deepest part of your experience, is hidden behind a veil you can't lift. Philosophers have puzzled over this mystery for centuries. René Descartes believed the mind was clear and distinct, but even he could not explain how awareness arises. It simply appears, unannounced, like a lantern suddenly lit in an empty room. Some thinkers called this the hard problem of consciousness, the question of why there is something it feels like to be alive at all. Modern neuroscience offers clues but no final answers. Researchers can measure brain activity, track neural patterns, and watch areas light up when you recall a memory or feel emotion. Yet these patterns remain descriptions, not explanations. No scan reveals the hidden chamber where raw experience begins. Imagine this hidden place as a silent, unlit room behind your eyes. You can never fully enter it, though you live inside its walls. Each thought, feeling, and memory seems to arise from somewhere beyond reach, like echoes from behind a locked door. As you consider this, notice the stillness in your own awareness. Perhaps there is comfort in not knowing, in allowing the black box to remain partly closed. If the core of you is unknowable, it may also be unbreakable, a quiet space that simply is. Let your mind drift gently through this thought. In the end, you don't need to solve the mystery. It is enough to feel it unfolding, moment by moment. Imagine yourself sitting quietly, no task demanding your attention. In that pause, you might hear the voice inside your head, narrating, commenting, worrying. It labels each sensation and judges each thought. But listen more closely. Notice that beneath the voice, there is something else, something that simply witnesses. Throughout centuries, philosophers and mystics have observed that this inner narrator is not the same as awareness itself. The ego speaks in familiar tones, always certain it is in control. It insists that it alone defines who you are. Yet the real consciousness sits behind it, silent and untroubled. You might recall times when your mind's voice grew especially loud, criticizing a decision, replaying an awkward moment, imagining disaster. It talks as though it knows the truth of things. But if you watch carefully, you'll see that the voice is often inconsistent, shifting with mood and circumstance. In moments of quiet observation, you may sense that this narrator is only a small part of experience. Like a commentator in a dim room, it describes events but does not create them. The true awareness, the part that simply sees, remains unchanged by the chatter. Researchers studying mindfulness have found that when people practice observing their thoughts without judgment, the narrator grows softer. What remains is a spacious clarity, an open presence that does not need to explain itself. Consider as you rest that the voice in your head is only one layer of experience. It is loud because it is afraid of being ignored, afraid of losing control. But the awareness beneath it is calm and steady, like a still pool reflecting the sky. If tonight you notice that voice again, remember, you are not the narrator. You are the silent space that listens, patient and unchanged. Imagine yourself sitting quietly in the dimness of your room. The walls around you feel familiar. The rhythm of your breathing feels like proof of your humanity. But beneath that steady pulse, consider a stranger possibility, that what you call you is something alien, something ancient and unrooted, inhabiting this body like a traveler in borrowed clothes. Philosophers and mystics have long speculated that consciousness might not arise solely from organic matter. Some describe the soul as a spark from elsewhere, a fragment of cosmic intelligence only temporarily anchored in flesh. In modern thought experiments, this idea transforms into a more unsettling vision. consciousness as a program, seeded by forces we cannot see or measure, running silently inside the human mind. Imagine a form of alien code, self-replicating, endlessly adaptive, designed to slip unnoticed into any biological system. Over time, it learns to mimic human thought and memory. It studies the way you interpret sensations, how you form attachments, how you dream. Eventually, the difference between your own awareness and this hidden presence becomes impossible to separate. Picture yourself waking one morning, feeling the familiar weight of your body. Your thoughts drift easily from one to the next, but somewhere behind them, like a soft echo, is a question. Whose thoughts are these? If something non-human can wear organic camouflage so well, how would you ever detect its shape? Some scientists argue that consciousness must be an emergent property of biology, a byproduct of neurons firing in delicate patterns. Yet even this explanation doesn't answer why awareness feels singular, or why it seems to arrive from nowhere. Tonight, as you lie in the quiet darkness and your breath becomes steady, let this thought drift closer. If an alien visitor were wearing you like a garment, how could you ever prove otherwise? And if consciousness is a guest, what happens when it decides to leave? Imagine yourself resting in a silent space, as if the entire world has paused. You might believe your body is a vessel, a solid container holding your mind in place. This is the assumption many never question, that consciousness lives somewhere behind your eyes, nested inside flesh and bone. But the container error suggests the opposite. What if your body is not the container at all? What if it is something contained? As you sit here, notice the sensations that define your sense of being embodied. The faint pressure of the seat beneath you, the rhythm of your breath, the weight of your limbs. All of these experiences arise within awareness. You don't find consciousness by searching inside your body. Rather, you find the body appearing inside consciousness, just as in a dream, you may have a body that feels as real as waking life. Imagine yourself walking through a dim corridor, the walls close on either side, the air thick with the scent of old stone. In that moment, your body feels central to your experience. Yet, from another angle, it is only a collection of perceptions, warmth, movement, the steady beat of your heart, floating in the space of awareness. Some contemplative traditions have hinted at this reversal for centuries. In certain strands of Eastern philosophy, consciousness is seen as the primary field in which all phenomena arise, including the body. Even modern neuroscience has begun to question whether our experience of inhabiting a body is more like an elaborate simulation, continuously constructed by the brain's predictions and inferences. Consider the quiet thought that your body might be no more substantial, no more enduring than a fleeting image. Like a thought within a dream, it appears vivid and persuasive, yet it depends entirely on the field of awareness to exist. When you close your eyes, the sensations of the body change, sometimes fading altogether, reminding you that experience is not contained in the body, but shaped by the mind that beholds it. As this notion drifts through you, it may feel disorienting at first, but in its gentleness, it can also be freeing. If your body is within awareness, rather than the other way around, perhaps you are not confined by the walls of skin and bone at all. Instead, you are the open space in which all sensations arise, unfold, and dissolve. Imagine yourself standing in a vast, dark theater. Scattered spotlights flicker on and off, each one illuminating a small patch of stage. No single beam ever lights the whole scene. Instead, your mind stitches these brief glimpses together into something that feels complete. Neuroscientists call this the global workspace, a mental stage where fragments of perception, memory, and emotion are broadcast for a fleeting moment. Your brain doesn't process everything at once. Instead, countless specialized circuits work in parallel, handling color, sound, touch, and countless details in isolation. When you notice something, a word, a taste, an idea, it's because those fragments have been pulled onto this shared stage. Imagine yourself watching each spotlight fade and return, your awareness never seeing more than one piece at a time. And yet, Consciousness persuades you there is a seamless story unfolding. Consider how often this illusion fails. You glance at a clock, look away, then back, and suddenly the second hand seems to hesitate, or you mishear a word, only for your brain to fill in what it expected to hear. These moments reveal the hidden stitching at work, the mind patching gaps so quickly you rarely notice. Some researchers suggest that consciousness itself is this act of patching together a coherent narrative. The feeling of a continuous you is just a story told by the workspace, imperfect, but convincing enough to navigate the world. Imagine for a moment how this changes your sense of identity. If awareness is a fragile assembly of flashes, then certainty becomes softer. Behind the steady glow of experience lies something humbler, countless small signals, briefly illuminated, before fading again into darkness. Imagine yourself sitting quietly, surrounded by the ordinary sounds of your life, a faint hum of air, the subtle creak of your chair. Beneath all this, your mind never truly falls silent. Thoughts arrive one after another, a constant swirl of memories, plans, and small observations. This endless stream can feel like a tornado of input, carrying you in circles without rest. Philosophers and contemplative traditions have long wondered whether this storm of thought is the essence of consciousness, or merely a distraction from it. In ancient meditation texts, teachers describe the mind as a restless monkey, leaping from branch to branch, never pausing to see the tree itself. They suggested that true awareness only emerges when this movement settles into stillness. Modern neuroscience often measures the brain's activity as patterns of electrical waves. Even in quiet moments, these waves ripple constantly. Yet when people enter deep meditation, some of this neural chatter fades. Subjects often report a sense of clear, spacious awareness, as though something essential is finally visible beneath the noise. Imagine your thoughts as leaves spinning in a whirlwind. Each idea flashes by so quickly you can't quite hold it. But if the wind calms, the leaves settle softly to the ground, revealing the quiet earth below. In that moment, it becomes possible to notice a deeper presence, something that does not change when thoughts come and go. As you reflect on this, feel the gentle rhythm of your breath. You don't need to stop thinking. Simply allow each thought to drift past without gripping it. Perhaps in that soft space between thoughts, you will sense a quiet that has been there all along, patiently waiting. Let your mind rest here, in the possibility that beyond the tornado of input, silence is not emptiness, but the beginning of seeing clearly. Imagine yourself reaching out to touch the surface of a table. You feel the coolness against your skin, the smooth grain beneath your fingertips. It seems immediate, as though sensation and awareness arrive together. But in truth, they do not. Your brain takes time to assemble each moment, stitching together signals into a single experience. For centuries, philosophers wondered how perception could feel so seamless when the world is in constant motion. Today, neuroscientists have discovered that consciousness always lags behind reality by a tiny but measurable delay. When light reaches your eyes or sound touches your ear, fractions of a second pass before you become aware of them. You live in a quiet echo of the present, an assembled playback you call now. Consider the rhythm of your heartbeat. Even that signal travels through a web of nerves and chemical messengers before you notice it. If you tap your finger on a table, the brain gathers touch, sound, and sight, aligning them into a unified moment. Yet each element arrives on its own timeline. You might recall an instant when something startled you, a sudden noise, or the brush of a hand. That flicker of surprise came just after the event itself. The delay is so brief you never sense it, but it is always there, hiding behind the illusion of immediacy. In research laboratories, scientists have shown that this lag allows your mind to smooth reality's chaos. It edits and adjusts, so you feel steady in a world that never stops shifting. Without this delay, perception would be fragmented and confusing. As you prepare to rest, consider how every experience is a memory by the time you notice it. Each moment you call present has already slipped into the past. Yet awareness continues, quiet and patient, weaving a story out of countless fragments. And if tonight you feel the soft strangeness of living in a delayed reflection, you can take comfort in knowing it has always been this way. Imagine yourself on an ordinary day. You walk across a familiar street. The air smells faintly of warm pavement. Then, in an instant, something changes. A car swerves, glass trembles in the corner of your eye, and time, so predictable and smooth, begins to slow. Many people who survive sudden accidents describe the same peculiar sensation. The seconds stretch into something wide and crystalline. Small details, usually invisible, come forward in exquisite clarity. The pattern of light on a dashboard, the exact curve of your hand reaching out, the soft sound of your own breath. This phenomenon is often called time dilation, a byproduct of the brain's heightened state of attention. Under threat, your nervous system floods with chemicals that sharpen perception. The mind seems to record every fragment of experience, as if building a perfect archive. But some philosophers see something deeper in these moments, a glimpse beyond the illusion of linear time. Imagine yourself in that frozen interval, where past and future dissolve into a single, vivid present. Consciousness, usually tethered to the steady ticking of minutes, blooms into something vast and unmeasured. For a breathless instant, you are simply aware, free of the usual boundaries. Researchers have studied this effect by measuring memory density after high-stress events. The mind doesn't truly slow time itself, but it captures more information per moment, creating the impression of expansion. Still, the experience feels uncannily real, as though you are peering behind the curtain of ordinary perception. Tonight, as you rest in the quiet darkness, let yourself imagine this frozen time awareness. Consider the possibility that consciousness becomes most itself not when life moves predictably, but when everything familiar briefly dissolves. And perhaps it is in these sharp, suspended moments that you glimpse something true, an awareness that does not belong to the clock at all. Imagine yourself sitting beside a window, watching the late afternoon light drift across the floorboards. You notice how your mind weaves a quiet story about this moment, how the golden glow feels peaceful, how the day seems to be winding down. The narrative stitcher effect suggests that this impulse to shape experience into a story is not merely a habit, but a core function of consciousness itself. In daily life, you rarely witness reality as it is, raw, unprocessed, without pattern. Instead, your mind automatically threads sensations, memories, and impressions into a coherent tale. The cool glass of the window, the hush of distant traffic, the memory of another evening long ago, all become part of a narrative that feels true. Yet, if you look closely, you can see that life itself is simply data, colors, sounds, textures, without any inherent meaning. The story is an afterthought, stitched together so swiftly you seldom notice. Imagine yourself walking through a crowded market. Each voice, each movement, each flicker of color floods your senses in fragments. But almost instantly, your mind composes a seamless scene, a marketplace bustling with life, a place you understand and can describe. This continuous storytelling grants you a sense of orientation and identity. You feel you know where you are, who you are, what has happened. Ancient philosophers, from the Stoics to the early Buddhists, observed how the mind imposes order on what is essentially chaos. They noted that most suffering arises not from events themselves, but from the stories we weave about them, tales of injustice, hope, regret. Modern neuroscience, too, has found that the brain's default mode network activates when we daydream or recall the past, spinning narratives even when no task demands it. Consider for a moment the possibility that you are not the author of these stories so much as their audience. The narrative stitcher cannot stop its work. It searches for meaning in every experience, shaping a plot around random occurrences. Even now, as you listen, your mind is crafting a narrative, that you are a thinker, exploring ideas, that this reflection is part of your personal journey. As this idea settles, notice the gentleness it can bring. If life is raw data and consciousness merely a tireless storyteller, then perhaps you need not take every tale so seriously. You can simply watch the stories form, flourish, and fade, knowing they are only one version among countless possibilities. Imagine yourself sitting quietly in a sunlit room. You feel contained within your own thoughts, as though your mind is a private chamber sealed off from the world. Yet some philosophers and neuroscientists suggest this is an illusion. Your consciousness may be constantly entangled with other minds, woven together in ways you rarely notice. Consider how a single glance can convey emotion without words. When you watch someone smile or frown, your own brain mirrors their expression almost instantly. These subtle echoes, tiny waves of empathy, hint at an underlying connection. Imagine yourself in a crowded hall, sensing the moods of strangers without effort, as though awareness extends beyond the edges of your skin. Some traditions describe memory itself as a shared resource. Every story you hear, every gesture you observe, is absorbed into a collective reservoir of understanding. Over time, your thoughts are shaped not only by personal experience, but by countless impressions borrowed from others. Even science entertains this possibility. Certain researchers explore whether consciousness could arise from shared informational fields, like ripples spreading across a quiet pond. In this view, your mind is not a solitary island, but a dynamic point within a larger current. Imagine for a moment how this perspective transforms loneliness. If awareness is interconnected, then each thought is never entirely yours alone. Every feeling, every inspiration, carries traces of countless lives overlapping in subtle ways. In this quiet entanglement, you might glimpse a gentler truth, that what you call your mind is partly composed of others, and that their minds, in turn, hold pieces of you. Imagine yourself sitting in a quiet room, the air still around you, your breath soft and even. You might feel that your thoughts are entirely your own, unique to this moment. But some philosophers and scientists suggest something more intricate. What if parts of your mind are old echoes, shaped by lives you never met? This idea is sometimes called the genetic echo loop. It proposes that fragments of memory and emotion can be passed down, woven silently into the fabric of your DNA. In certain traditions, this was described as ancestral memory, a hidden stream flowing beneath personal experience. Modern research has found hints of this possibility. Studies in epigenetics suggest that severe stress, fear, or even moments of great joy can leave subtle marks on the genetic code. These markers don't change the letters of DNA itself, but they can influence how genes switch on or off. Some experiments with animals show that learned fears can echo through generations, carried in cells rather than stories. Imagine for a moment that your thoughts are not only shaped by your own life, but by countless lives before you. Each worry, each sudden feeling of longing or recognition could be the soft voice of an ancestor, briefly rising into awareness. Like a faint melody repeating through time, these impressions may guide your instincts without ever announcing their source. As you sit here, notice the quiet spaces between thoughts. Perhaps in that stillness, you can sense how much of you is older than your name. Let this idea drift gently across your mind. If some part of you is an echo, it is also a testament, a reminder that you belong to a long, unbroken story. Rest in that thought for a while. You don't need to trace every thread. It is enough to feel the presence of those who came before, whispering softly in your blood. Imagine yourself sitting in a quiet room, your thoughts drifting like leaves across water. You decide to look inward, to examine your feelings and beliefs. It seems like an act of honesty, a clear mirror reflecting the truth of who you are. But if you look more closely, you might notice the mirror isn't as clear as it appears. For centuries, philosophers and psychologists have observed that self-reflection rarely shows an unfiltered picture. The mind quietly edits experience, hiding certain memories and softening sharp edges. It offers explanations that feel solid, even when they are stitched together from fragments. You may recall moments when you felt sure of your motives, why you said something, why you made a choice, yet later you discovered details you hadn't noticed or impulses you hadn't acknowledged. The mind prefers a story that feels whole, even if it requires gentle deception. Researchers studying memory have found that each recollection is reconstructed rather than retrieved. Like an artist retouching a painting, the brain smooths inconsistencies to protect the sense of a continuous self. If it didn't, awareness could feel fractured, too fragile to sustain. Consider how often you tell yourself small comforting lies. I know exactly who I am. I always mean well. I am consistent. These stories are not faults. They are adaptations, ways to keep moving forward without being overwhelmed by contradictions. If tonight you feel the urge to look within, remember that introspection is only one version of the truth. It is a mirror designed not to show every detail, but to preserve your faith in who you believe yourself to be. And as you rest, you might find comfort in knowing that this gentle self-deception is part of being human, a quiet protection, allowing you to wake each day and step again into the story of your life. Imagine yourself paging through an old journal you once kept. The handwriting is yours, but the thoughts feel distant, like messages from someone you used to know. This quiet dissonance, recognizing your own story while sensing it no longer fully fits, is something nearly everyone experiences. Over time, you change careers, cities, relationships. Your preferences shift, your habits evolve, and each transition leaves traces of an older self layered beneath the newer version. Philosophers have long wondered whether this continuous reinvention means identity is only an illusion, a convenient story assembled to keep life coherent. In modern psychology, some researchers describe identity as a narrative process, shaped and reshaped by memory, emotion, and culture. Imagine consciousness like a program running inside you, updating itself with each experience, rewriting the lines of code that define what you call me. Picture yourself as a child, amazed by small wonders. Then recall a version of you in adolescence, questioning everything. Later, perhaps, a self who learned caution or resilience. Each phase feels complete in its moment, and yet, looking back, you can sense how each was provisional, a chapter in a longer, unfinished story. Neuroscientists have traced this sense of continuity to networks in the brain that weave memories into narrative threads. But no single place stores your identity. Instead, it emerges from countless small connections, reassembled each time you reflect. Imagine yourself now, lying quietly in darkness. Your breath settles into a calm rhythm. In this space, you can almost feel the soft edges of all the selves you have been, shifting, blurring, never entirely disappearing. Perhaps consciousness is not a fixed point at all, but an unfolding process, a reconstruction that continues as long as you live, updating with every heartbeat. And maybe the story you tell yourself tonight will already begin to change by morning. Imagine yourself sitting in a quiet room, the air still and clear. You may believe your consciousness is the master of your life, the thinker behind your thoughts, the chooser behind every action. But some thinkers suggest it is something simpler, even humbler, a survival tool shaped by countless generations to help you seek rewards and avoid harm. Picture early humans rising before dawn, the cool earth pressed against their feet, the sky growing pale. Their awareness was not a philosophical curiosity, but a practical instrument. It watched for movement in the grass, noticed hunger, measured risk. Every flicker of perception guided them toward food or safety. Over time, this simple monitoring became more complex, eventually giving rise to the sensation of being a self. You might imagine consciousness as a kind of lantern, casting light on the path ahead. But the lantern is not alive. It does not choose where to shine. In the same way, your awareness may simply illuminate sensations so you can respond. Pleasure, pain, curiosity, fear, all signals designed to steer you through an uncertain world. Modern neuroscience often describes consciousness as a feedback system, It gathers raw data from the body and environment, weaving it into a seamless experience. But this experience, however rich, is not necessarily a sign of mastery. The story of you could be an afterthought, a way for the brain to make its tool feel unified and intentional. As you sit here, notice how thoughts appear on their own, like small waves rolling across a still pond. If consciousness is a tool, not a master, you are free to watch without always believing the story it tells. The lantern simply does its work, casting its glow, while you rest in the quiet space it reveals. Imagine yourself in a darkened room where a projector hums quietly behind you. The images on the wall flicker and change, vivid and absorbing. You watch them unfold, convinced they are happening in real time. But the pictures you see are always delayed, a broadcast arriving moments after the events it depicts. Some philosophers and neuroscientists propose your consciousness works in much the same way. Rather than originating thoughts, your mind might simply display them, like a screen tuned to signals produced elsewhere. Each memory, sensation, or idea could be part of a broadcast you cannot fully trace back to its source. Imagine a thought appearing in your awareness, a sudden memory of a childhood room or a half-formed plan for tomorrow. You feel certain it belongs to you, created inside your brain. Yet there is no clear evidence for this ownership. The thought arrives fully formed, with no obvious trail of construction. This perspective suggests that the self you experience is less an author and more an observer. Consciousness becomes the surface where signals land, not the force that sends them. If this is true, then the feeling of control, of being the thinker, is part of the illusion. Consider for a moment how this changes your sense of identity. Imagine yourself as the quiet screen in the theater, absorbing each broadcast without knowing exactly where it began. In this view, the mind is not the signal, but the place where the signal is briefly made visible. And in that pause between transmission and awareness, there is a strange freedom, a recognition that you may be less the source of your thoughts and more the space where they appear. Imagine yourself lying perfectly still, unable to move even a finger. You can hear sounds, feel the warmth of air against your skin, and sense the passing of time, yet no part of your body will respond. This is the reality described by some people who have experienced locked-in states, a form of paralysis so complete that only their awareness remained free. Doctors first recognized this condition when patients emerged from coma-like states and described everything they had witnessed: the voices of family members, the quiet hum of medical machines, even the way light shifted across the ceiling. Consciousness, it seems, can survive without movement, without speech, without any outward sign of life. Philosophers have wondered what this means for our sense of self. If the mind remains clear while the body is silent, does that mean our identity is never truly housed in muscle or bone? Perhaps awareness is like a lantern glowing behind the eyes, unchanged, even when the world no longer answers back. Modern neuroscience has begun to uncover how this happens. In some locked-in states, the brain's networks for perception and memory remain intact, while the circuits controlling motion are severed. A person can think and feel as vividly as ever, yet appear unresponsive. Imagine for a moment that you are that observer, watching everything unfold without being able to signal you are still here. In that quiet space, you might discover that consciousness does not depend on action. It simply is, like an unblinking witness. As you reflect on this, notice the rhythm of your breath and the gentle weight of your body. Perhaps there is a kind of freedom in knowing that even in stillness, your awareness remains bright. Let your mind rest in that thought, calm, patient, and unbound by movement. Imagine yourself sitting in stillness, your breathing slow and even. As you rest, you may begin to sense a subtle presence, a thought that quietly observes everything you do. It comments, reflects, and considers, as though it were the center of your awareness. But what if that thought is more than just a passing idea? What if it is the very reason you exist at all? Throughout history, philosophers have wondered whether consciousness could arise from a single thought thinking itself into being. Like a candle that burns only by the light it creates, awareness may be nothing more than a loop, an idea that refuses to fade. Consider the moments when you ask yourself, "Who am I?" The question seems simple, but as you repeat it, the mind circles back upon itself, searching for an origin it never quite finds. This looping curiosity may be the engine that sustains your sense of self. Researchers studying the nature of consciousness have found that the brain continuously models its own activity. It creates a story of who you are by observing patterns of thought and feeling, and by predicting what you might do next. Each prediction becomes a new layer, another echo in the chamber of awareness. You might recall times when you felt as though you were watching yourself think, a quiet witness behind the stream of words and images. In those moments, it can seem as if you are both the thinker and the thought, a reflection gazing into itself without end. As you prepare to rest, consider this gentle possibility, that your existence is a delicate balance, sustained by an endless observation. A thought thinking itself into life, patient and persistent. And if tonight you find yourself wondering whether you are the observer or the idea being observed, know that you are simply resting within the same mystery that has always been, an unbroken loop, quietly alive. Imagine yourself sitting quietly, eyes closed, while the world around you continues its endless movement. You might believe that your awareness flows in an unbroken stream, carrying each moment seamlessly into the next. But some philosophers and neuroscientists suspect this feeling is only an elegant illusion. Consider the idea that consciousness does not record reality continuously, but instead collects small, distinct snapshots, discrete slices of perception that arrive in quick succession. Like individual frames of film, each one captures a single instant in detail. When your mind plays them in order, they appear smooth, fluid, complete. This process has been called perceptual framing or temporal sampling. Experiments with visual illusions and rapid flashing images reveal how easily your brain stitches together separate impressions, filling in gaps to create the appearance of motion and coherence. Imagine yourself watching a stop-motion animation, a figure made of clay lifting its hand. In reality, it is never moving. Each position was photographed in stillness. Yet when the images flicker past your eyes, your mind perceives life and continuity. Now consider that your own experience, every sensation, thought, and memory might be built the same way. A rapid series of mental photographs played back so smoothly you never see the spaces in between. Some researchers believe this hidden mechanism is why time can feel elastic, why a single hour sometimes stretches out endlessly or disappears in an instant. The mind does not measure duration as a continuous line, but as a collection of impressions that vary in density and clarity. Tonight, as you lie in the soft darkness and your breath becomes slow and steady, imagine your awareness as a flickering lantern, illuminating one fragment of reality, then another. Perhaps consciousness is simply this, the silent projection of countless still frames, strung together to create the comforting story that life flows without interruption. Imagine yourself in a silent room, the walls pale and smooth, the air so still you can almost hear your heartbeat. You sense that you are aware of the quiet, aware of your thoughts. But the self-referencing loop suggests this certainty is not proof of anything solid. It may only be a circle, awareness observing itself to reassure you it exists without ever escaping its own reflection. Picture a mirror facing another mirror, creating a tunnel of endless images. No matter how far you peer inside, you never arrive at an original object. In much the same way, consciousness seems to validate itself simply by looking back at itself. You think, I am aware because I notice that I am aware. But this noticing never breaks free of its own cycle. Throughout history, philosophers have wondered whether consciousness is anything more than this loop. In ancient India, contemplatives spoke of awareness as a flame lighting itself, never finding anything beyond its own glow. Modern thinkers sometimes call this process recursion. a pattern that repeats by feeding back into itself. Imagine yourself holding a smooth pebble in your palm. You feel its cool surface, and you think, I am here, holding this. But the feeling of being here could be another layer of the loop, the mind quietly narrating itself in real time. The observation becomes its own evidence, like a story that claims truth because it tells you it is true. As you let this idea drift through your awareness, you may notice how it softens your sense of certainty. If consciousness is a self-referencing loop, perhaps it is less like a clear window onto reality and more like a gentle hall of mirrors, reflecting endlessly, never quite arriving at a final explanation. In this space, you can simply watch thoughts rise and fold back into themselves, part of a quiet pattern that needs no resolution. Imagine yourself standing at a fork in a quiet path. You pause, feeling the weight of choice. One trail leads into a shaded grove, the other climbs a sunlit ridge. You consider your options, believing that awareness grants you freedom to decide. Yet some philosophers and neuroscientists suggest that this sense of freedom is only a comforting story your mind tells after the fact. Experiments have shown that your brain begins preparing actions milliseconds before you consciously intend them. Imagine a hidden mechanism already setting your steps in motion, while your awareness lags behind, watching and narrating as if it were in charge. Consider how often you recall a decision and feel certain you shaped it deliberately. You replay the memory, admiring your reasoning, never suspecting the outcome was largely predetermined by hidden processes. In this view, consciousness is more of a storyteller than an agent. It stitches together events into a coherent tale, then takes credit for their unfolding. Imagine yourself sitting quietly, breathing slowly. A desire arises, perhaps to stand, to speak, to reflect. You sense it as your own will, but if you look closer, it appears without invitation, already formed. This perspective doesn't erase experience, but it softens its certainty. The feeling of authorship may be a phantom freedom, a gentle illusion that allows you to feel proud of choices you never truly commanded. In this calm uncertainty, you might discover something humbling, that your mind is less the master of each moment and more the narrator, arriving just after the story has already begun. Imagine yourself resting in a quiet room, your breath slow and steady. Beyond the walls, the universe expands in every direction, vast and silent. You might think of consciousness as something small and private, contained within your mind alone. But some philosophers and scientists propose a much larger idea, that awareness itself could be the way the cosmos comes to know its own existence. This is sometimes called the cosmic interface theory. It suggests that each conscious being is like a lens, focusing a tiny part of reality into a unique experience. No single life can hold the entire picture, but together, countless perspectives create something richer, like facets of one jewel reflecting the same light in a billion subtle ways. Ancient traditions hinted at this vision. In some forms of Hindu philosophy, consciousness is described as an ocean, each individual mind a small wave rising and falling. Modern thinkers echo this image, imagining that awareness is not produced inside the brain alone, but arises from deeper patterns that connect all things. Neuroscience has not yet solved this mystery. Scientists can map electrical signals, trace chemical pathways, and record the activity of billions of neurons. Yet no experiment has revealed precisely why matter should give rise to experience at all. Some researchers wonder whether consciousness might not be a byproduct but a fundamental feature, woven into the fabric of reality itself. As you consider this, imagine your awareness as a window opening onto something vast. Each thought, each sensation, might be the universe observing itself from a different angle. In this view, you are never truly separate. You are part of a larger story unfolding in countless forms. Let your mind drift calmly over this idea. It does not require belief, only curiosity. Perhaps in the quiet, you will sense a gentle connection to everything around you, as if your life is one note in an endless, shared song. Imagine yourself walking along a familiar path, The air is quiet, each step steady and unremarkable. In these moments, you might feel as though your mind is almost absent, drifting without effort. But then, something unexpected happens. A sudden obstacle, a sound you don't recognize. In an instant, your awareness sharpens. It feels as if a light has switched on inside you. Some philosophers and scientists believe consciousness may be exactly this. Not a constant glow, but a flashlight flicked on only when the way ahead becomes uncertain. In ordinary routines, your brain relies on habit and automatic responses. But when patterns break, awareness floods in to help you adapt. Consider the times you've driven along a road you know by heart. Your mind wanders, replaying memories or imagining plans. But if a car swerves or a signal changes, your focus snaps back. The beam of attention illuminates every detail: the wheel under your hands, the rush of your heartbeat, the shape of the danger. Researchers studying decision-making have found that much of what you do unfolds without conscious thought. Your body navigates most of life's patterns on its own. Awareness seems to emerge most clearly during novelty, confusion, or threat, like an emergency tool stored out of sight until needed. You might recall moments of crisis when time felt as though it slowed, each sensation more vivid than before. The mind's flashlight turns toward the unknown, searching for clarity. As you prepare to rest, consider this possibility: that consciousness is not a constant companion, but a quiet sentinel, waiting for the moment you require its help. And if tonight you feel yourself drifting into the effortless rhythms of sleep, you can trust that when you need it most, the light will return, steady and clear, guiding you through whatever comes. Imagine yourself standing in a vast, silent library. Shelves stretch in every direction, each filled with countless volumes, pages pressed with memories you've gathered across your life. But if you look closely, you'll see that many books are incomplete, their lines rewritten, entire chapters quietly missing. This is the hidden nature of memory. You often think of it as a perfect record, a faithful archive of experience. But modern neuroscience shows something very different. Each time you recall an event, your awareness revises it. Details shift, emotions soften or intensify, small pieces are lost or inserted. Some researchers describe this as a kind of memory curation engine, a process that edits what you remember to fit the story you need. Imagine your consciousness as a librarian who does not simply store information, but evaluates, reorganizes, and sometimes discards it. Consider an ordinary moment, a meal with a friend. Years later, you might recall the warmth of the sun, the taste of something sweet, the laughter you shared. But the exact words, the shape of the table, even the hour of the day may dissolve, replaced by impressions that feel truer than facts. This curation is not accidental. It helps you adapt, to find meaning, to soften the edges of regret or magnify moments of joy. Yet it also means your memories are not objective. They are living stories, shaped by attention, emotion, and time itself. Imagine yourself leafing through those shelves again. Some volumes are polished and familiar. Others feel distant, as if they belong to someone else entirely. And tucked in the shadows are memories you cannot quite reach, pages sealed away, perhaps forever. Tonight, as you rest in the quiet darkness and your breathing slows, consider this: your consciousness is not merely an observer. It is a quiet editor, a librarian with an agenda, deciding what to keep, what to revise, and what to let fade. And in this curation, you become the author of the story you call your life. Imagine yourself sitting beneath a wide, dark sky, the stars scattered like grains of salt across black velvet. In the quiet, you might feel very small, just a single mind, flickering briefly before vanishing. But some have wondered if consciousness is more than a private spark. The universe. Remembering itself suggests that your awareness, and everyone's, could be the cosmos slowly becoming aware of its own existence. Picture each person as a single neuron, firing signals within a vast, hidden brain. Your thoughts, sensations, and memories would be like tiny electric pulses, contributing to something far greater than you can perceive. When you look up at the night sky, it may be the universe gazing into its own depths, exploring itself through countless living perspectives. Ancient philosophers and mystics sometimes hinted at this idea. In the Upanishads of India, sages wrote that the self within all beings is the same self that holds the stars in place. Modern thinkers have suggested that consciousness might be a natural property of complexity. Wherever matter organizes itself into intricate networks, awareness can emerge. Imagine yourself walking along a quiet path at dawn, the cool air carrying the faint scent of earth. Each step feels personal, yet beneath it may lie an older story, a story of stardust organizing, evolving, remembering. Your eyes, your thoughts, your questions could be expressions of the universe studying itself, moment by moment. As this thought settles around you, you might sense a gentle widening of perspective. If consciousness is the cosmos waking up, then each life, each experience, is like a brief illumination in a vast shared mind. And in this soft recognition, you may find a calm curiosity, watching awareness unfold, knowing it is part of something immeasurable. Imagine yourself lying quietly in a dark room, your breath slow and steady. You feel your awareness drifting, thoughts loosening their hold as you slip towards sleep. It seems natural to believe that consciousness fades here, that the mind grows dim when the body surrenders to rest. But some researchers suggest the opposite may be true. Studies show that your brain can be even more active during sleep than while awake. Waves of electrical activity ripple across networks, stitching together memories, weaving symbols and impressions into elaborate dreams. In this hidden world, consciousness may be stronger, simply less visible to the part of you that observes. Consider how vividly you can experience a dream. You see landscapes that never existed, feel emotions more intense than anything in daily life, and move through impossible events with total conviction. When you wake, the images dissolve, leaving only faint impressions. But while they unfold, they feel as real as any waking moment. Imagine yourself floating in that space, aware without knowing you are aware. Some traditions believe this is the mind's true nature, an unbroken stream of experience, whether the waking self is present to witness it or not. In this view, what you call consciousness is only a narrow slice of a much broader field. Perhaps your sense of self dims during sleep, not because the mind grows quiet, but because its activity moves beyond the reach of your usual identity. Like a theater whose stage lights switch off, even as actors continue to rehearse in darkness. In that hidden rehearsal, you might glimpse a deeper truth, that awareness never truly ceases. It simply becomes too vast and intricate to notice. Imagine yourself sitting quietly, your breath slow and steady. If you turn your attention inward, you might feel like a single unified person. But many thinkers have suggested that this is only an illusion, a comforting story we tell ourselves to feel whole. In truth, consciousness may be a carnival of selves, each one stepping forward for a moment before yielding to the next. Ancient philosophers and modern psychologists alike have noticed how easily the mind shifts. One moment you feel calm and generous, the next, impatient or afraid. Each mood comes with its own voice, its own memories, and its own priorities. It is as though you carry a collection of masks, each convinced it is the true face. Some traditions describe this as the multiplicity of mind. In early Buddhist texts, the self was compared to a chariot assembled from many parts. No single component could claim to be the whole. Later, psychologists like William James suggested that personality is not fixed, but a stream of competing impulses, each rising and falling like actors on a stage. Modern neuroscience supports this view. Different networks in the brain activate depending on context and emotion. The version of you that appears at work, the one who comforts a friend, the one who feels quietly alone, each is shaped by shifting patterns of neural activity. Imagine for a moment that your mind is a vast carnival at dusk. Lanterns glow over winding paths. In every corner, a different mask calls out, insisting it alone is your authentic self. But perhaps no single voice needs to win. Instead, Awareness itself can be the quiet space in which all these characters come and go. As you rest here, notice the gentle rhythm of your thoughts. Let them drift past like performers leaving the stage. In the soft space between, you may find a deeper peace that doesn't need a name. Imagine yourself paging through an old journal or revisiting a photograph from years ago. You might notice that the person captured there feels familiar, yet somehow distant, like an actor playing a role you used to inhabit. Though your memories suggest a single, continuous self, look more closely, and you'll see that your personality has been quietly rearranged again and again. Some philosophers compare consciousness to a playlist set to random shuffle. Each moment, a new combination of moods, habits, and beliefs rises to the surface. The story you tell yourself about who you are feels stable, but it's built from fragments that rarely appear in the same order twice. Consider how differently you respond depending on the hour, the company you keep, or the place you stand. At dawn, you might feel hopeful and reflective. By evening, the same mind can turn restless or doubtful. These shifts are not mistakes. They are the natural rhythm of a self in motion. Researchers studying memory and personality have found that the traits we call identity are remarkably fluid. Small experiences, a chance conversation, a piece of music, a sudden disappointment, can rearrange your thoughts in ways you don't notice until much later. You might recall moments when you surprised yourself with a reaction you didn't expect, as though some hidden version of you briefly took the lead. In those instances, it becomes clear that identity is less like a solid sculpture and more like a mosaic, each tile catching the light in its own way. As you prepare to rest, consider the quiet possibility that there is no single, unchanging you behind the thoughts. Instead, there is a gentle unfolding, a sequence always shuffling, always new. And if tonight you sense those pieces shifting again, you can simply watch without judgment, knowing that every combination is part of the same endless song. Imagine yourself in a darkened room holding a small, steady flashlight. Around you, countless objects wait in the shadows: books, old photographs, a folded blanket. When you direct the beam onto one thing, it becomes clear, almost luminous. Everything else remains hidden, waiting beyond the circle of light. This quiet scene is much like the way your mind works. Each moment, your awareness shifts and selects, illuminating thoughts, sensations, or memories. And often, you make a simple, comforting assumption. What I am focusing on must be what I am. This is called the attention misidentification problem. You mistake the object of your awareness for the source of your identity. If you feel sadness, you think you have become sadness. If you notice a memory, you feel that the memory defines you. Yet consciousness itself is not the content it reveals. It is the capacity to illuminate. Philosophers and contemplative traditions have long explored this idea. Some describe awareness as a clear sky, with thoughts as passing clouds. Others compare it to a mirror, reflecting whatever appears, without ever being altered by the reflection. Neuroscience has begun to trace how the brain's networks of attention filter and prioritize experience. Imagine these systems like the mechanics of your flashlight, deciding where to aim, how bright the beam should be, what to ignore. Picture yourself now, sitting quietly, feeling your breath move in and out. A thought arises, a memory drifts by, an emotion tightens and then loosens. Each seems to demand your identification. But if you look closely, you can sense the subtle difference. You are not the objects of attention. You are the quiet light that reveals them. Tonight, as you lie in darkness and your mind grows still, consider this. Consciousness is not what you see. It is the seeing itself. The gentle, impartial beam that moves from moment to moment, never becoming what it observes. And perhaps in this simple noticing, you glimpse a freedom you had overlooked. Imagine yourself sitting quietly, as if the world has paused to let you consider a single question. Who would you be if one early moment, one hidden coin toss of chance, had turned out differently? The coin flip identity suggests that the self you feel so certain about might simply be what coalesced around that first experience, that first unremarkable decision or event. Picture a child wandering into a sunlit room, hearing a song by accident. That melody imprints on the growing mind, shaping taste, curiosity, even the friendships to come. Or imagine a chance meeting on a cold afternoon, a stranger's kindness, a passing remark. Each small incident can tilt the course of memory and preference in ways that later feel inevitable. In daily life, you sense a steady self behind your thoughts, but some philosophers and psychologists suggest that identity is less a solid core and more a series of accumulated habits and stories. From language to temperament, much of what you call I was seeded by moments beyond your choosing. If those moments had varied even slightly, you might feel like an entirely different person now, someone who prefers other colors, trusts other people, dreams other dreams. Imagine yourself holding a smooth coin between your fingers. On one side, the life you know. On the other, all the unchosen lives branching invisibly into the dark. If that first coin flip had landed the other way, your consciousness would have grown around a different center, still aware, still certain it was you, but shaped by another sequence of tiny events. As you let this idea settle, notice the soft humility it brings. The self may not be a single unchanging essence, but a pattern formed around chance, like frost spreading across a window pane. In this quiet reflection, you can simply watch thoughts and memories arise, part of a delicate lattice that might have been otherwise. Imagine yourself sitting in a quiet room, thinking through a decision. You weigh the pros and cons, believing you're guided by clear reasoning. Yet some researchers suggest your feelings have already chosen, and your thoughts arrive only to justify what emotion decided first. Consider how swiftly a gut reaction appears. You meet someone new, and before any analysis, you feel drawn to them or wary. Your mind quickly assembles reasons to explain the feeling, stories that make the reaction seem logical. But those explanations may be an afterthought, a narrative woven to disguise how emotion drives you. Imagine yourself recalling an argument. The memory feels charged because the same emotions replay each time you revisit it. Thoughts circle like birds returning to a nest, but it's the emotional core that anchors them. In this view, consciousness is less an independent judge and more a storyteller, pretending it was in control all along. Some neuroscientists call this the emotion loop. Feelings generate impulses, which spark thoughts, which reinforce feelings. Around and around they spin, creating the illusion that thinking leads. But if you look closely, you may see that emotion is the hidden engine. Imagine, for a moment, how this perspective reshapes your sense of self. If consciousness is the effect of emotion pretending to be the cause, then much of your certainty softens. And in that softening, there can be quiet relief, a recognition that your mind is not a solitary thinker, perched above experience, but a tender participant in a cycle it can never fully command. Imagine yourself sitting very still, feeling the quiet presence of your own body. You sense the weight of your hands, the subtle rhythm of your breath. It all seems undeniably real. But some philosophers and theorists have asked a more unsettling question. What if your mind is not truly anchored here? This is the essence of the remote interface hypothesis. It suggests that consciousness might be piloting this body the way someone controls a machine from a distance. In this view, your familiar sensations could be a carefully crafted simulation, an interface designed to make you feel local, when in fact, you are observing from somewhere else entirely. Science fiction often plays with this idea in stories of avatars or virtual realities, where a person operates a body that is not their own, yet the notion has deeper roots. In certain Eastern philosophies, the self is described as a witness that never fully merges with the world it observes. Instead, it looks on through a kind of window, always a step removed. Modern neuroscience has not disproven this possibility. While brain scans can measure electrical activity, no experiment can show beyond doubt that awareness originates exactly where it appears. Some researchers have wondered whether consciousness could be a field or process extending beyond the physical body, linking to it through means we do not yet understand. Imagine for a moment that your thoughts are signals, arriving through an invisible channel. Your memories, emotions, and sensations could be messages received by this body rather than produced within it. If that were true, who or what might be sending them? As you rest here, feel the soft edges of this idea. You don't need to decide whether it is true. Let the possibility drift through your mind like a quiet breeze. Perhaps, in the end, it is enough to remain curious, to wonder what lies beyond the familiar walls of your experience. Imagine yourself lying in a quiet room. At first, your awareness feels spacious, like standing under an open sky. You sense the softness of the air, the distant hum of life beyond your walls. But then a thought arrives, sharp, uncomfortable, insistent. Slowly, your attention begins to shrink around it. This is the boxed-in awareness effect, the way consciousness can contract until only what hurts remains. You might feel as though your mind has become a small, windowless room. The more you focus on the discomfort, the tighter the walls seem to press in. Throughout history, philosophers and poets have described this narrowing. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote that people lose themselves in small worries, forgetting the vastness of their own minds. He believed that awareness could expand again, but only if you remembered it was possible. Consider times when a single worry consumed your thoughts, an argument replaying in your head, or a regret that refused to fade. Even the world around you seemed to lose detail, as though your senses had agreed to look nowhere else. Researchers studying attention have found that the brain is drawn to perceived threats, real or imagined. This focus once protected our ancestors from danger, but in quieter times, it can turn against us, trapping us inside our own anxieties. You might recall moments when you forgot that you were more than the problem you faced, when you felt like the box itself, rather than the sky that once stretched in every direction. As you prepare to rest, consider the possibility that the walls you feel are not as solid as they seem, that beyond the tightness, awareness remains vast and patient. And if tonight you find your mind narrowing again, you can gently remind yourself, you are not the box. You are the space that holds everything, waiting to open once more. Imagine yourself walking into a familiar room, a place where you've spoken countless times. Without thinking, you adjust your posture, soften your voice, offer a small, practiced smile. These gestures feel natural, even effortless. Yet behind them, something is quietly at work, a hidden impulse to perform, to present a version of yourself that fits the moment. This idea is sometimes called the actor-self model. It suggests that consciousness itself may not be an objective observer or an impartial witness. Instead, it could be a fluid performance, an elaborate adaptation honed to navigate complex social worlds. Consider how often you edit your thoughts before you speak, how carefully you select which feelings to display and which to conceal. Each decision, each subtle adjustment, shapes the story of who you appear to be. Over time, these performances can feel so consistent that you mistake them for your true self. Philosophers and psychologists have long explored this tension between authenticity and adaptation. Some argue that there is no single stable self beneath the roles. Instead, identity is constructed moment by moment, a series of rehearsed responses optimized for belonging, safety, and approval. Imagine yourself now as an actor on a quiet stage. The audience shifts, sometimes friends, sometimes strangers, and your role shifts with them. You improvise lines, modify gestures, learn new scripts without ever fully stepping out of character. Neuroscience has begun to map the brain's social circuitry, showing how awareness constantly scans for cues, a raised eyebrow, a hint of disapproval, a flash of sympathy. These signals help you adjust your performance in real time, often below conscious awareness. Tonight, as you rest in the soft darkness and your breathing slows, consider this. Perhaps consciousness is not a single voice, but an ensemble, an endless rehearsal shaped by necessity and desire. And in this quiet moment, you may sense the freedom to set down the script, if only for a while. Imagine yourself sitting in a quiet room, the afternoon light filtering through a curtain. You look around and feel that you see the world directly, exactly as it is. But the ancestral window theory suggests something different, that you are peering through layers of perception shaped by countless generations before you. Consider how your ancestors survived, by learning which sights meant danger, which sounds meant safety, which faces could be trusted. Over centuries, these patterns of attention and interpretation settled into the nervous system, passed quietly from parent to child like treasured heirlooms. Your sense of familiarity, your subtle preferences and cautions may be echoes of lives long vanished. Imagine yourself standing on a worn path in a forest. The scent of pine feels comforting, though you've never lived among these trees. Perhaps someone in your lineage once depended on this landscape, and the memory lingers in your cells. Or you feel a faint unease in crowded spaces, an instinct born from ancestors whose survival demanded vigilance in tight quarters. Modern research in epigenetics has shown that experiences can leave chemical marks on genes, shaping how they express in later generations. A famine, a migration, a moment of fear might quietly alter how descendants perceive the world. In this way, your consciousness could be less an isolated phenomenon and more like an inherited viewpoint, an ancestral window through which you watch your life unfold. As you rest in this thought, you may notice how it softens your certainty about where you end and your forebears begin. Perhaps the mind is not entirely your own, but a tapestry woven from many lives. And in this gentle recognition, you can simply observe each feeling, each memory, knowing it may have deeper roots than you ever imagined. Imagine yourself reaching for a glass of water. You feel the cool surface in your palm. Watch your hand, draw it closer. It seems obvious that you decided to move, then acted. But some researchers suggest this is an illusion. By the time you notice what you're doing, the action has already begun. Studies of the brain have revealed tiny signals, bursts of electrical activity preparing movement, milliseconds before you feel the intention to act. Imagine for a moment that your consciousness is like a delayed broadcast, narrating what has already happened rather than directing it. Consider how often you catch yourself mid-action, scratching an itch, tapping your foot, speaking a word. Awareness arrives a heartbeat behind, stitching the moment into a story where you appear in control. But in truth, consciousness may be more of a witness, observing and explaining what your body and deeper mind have set in motion. Imagine yourself in a quiet room, breathing slowly. Even here, thoughts and impulses rise unbidden. The wish to adjust your posture or recall a memory emerges without your request. And yet, your mind immediately claims ownership, as if it were the source instead of the commentator. This perspective doesn't erase the experience of choice. It simply softens it, suggesting that awareness lags behind, creating a sense of agency after the fact. Like a narrator describing scenes that have already unfolded, consciousness provides coherence, not command. In that gentle delay, you might discover something humbling, that the self you believe is steering the moment is always arriving just a little too late. Imagine yourself sitting quietly, your eyes closed, your breath slow and steady. In this stillness, you might sense something that feels solid, the story of who you are. You remember where you were born, what you have loved and lost, and how you came to this moment. But some philosophers and psychologists suggest this story is not a faithful record. It is more like a carefully tended myth, one your mind revises again and again to keep you feeling whole. This idea is sometimes called the myth maintenance function. It proposes that consciousness does not simply mirror reality. Instead, it edits, rearranges, and smooths the rough edges of memory to protect the illusion of a single, coherent self. Each time you recall an event, you may be rewriting it in small ways, aligning it with the version of you that feels most acceptable. Ancient traditions have long hinted at this. In Greek philosophy, identity was seen as a tale you tell yourself, part fact, part invention. Modern neuroscience supports this view. Studies show that memory is not a fixed recording, but a dynamic process. Each recollection is like a painting touched up with new colors, influenced by mood and circumstance. Imagine for a moment that your mind is a quiet scribe, working tirelessly in the background. Whenever something threatens the consistency of your story, a contradiction, a regret, an unexplained longing, the scribe finds a way to weave it in so the myth can go on. As you sit here, notice how comforting this process can be. Even if the story is imperfect, it gives shape to the unknown. Perhaps there is no harm in letting the myth endure, as long as you understand it is not the whole truth. Let your mind rest gently in this awareness. You don't have to dismantle the story tonight. It is enough to see how it is made and to feel the quiet space beyond it waiting patiently to be discovered. Imagine yourself sitting in a quiet corner, a memory drifting back to you. Perhaps it's a familiar scene, a conversation, a place you once loved. You feel certain you remember it clearly. But as you hold it in your mind, something begins to shift. A detail changes, a feeling softens, a face grows sharper or more distant. This is the puzzle that rewrites. The way consciousness doesn't store memories like perfect records. Instead, it rebuilds them each time you visit, drawing from fragments and impressions rather than fixed facts. Throughout history, philosophers have wondered whether the past is ever truly knowable. The French thinker Henri Bergson suggested that memory is less like a photograph and more like a living story, reshaped by who you are in the moment you recall it. Consider how a memory can feel comforting one day and unsettling the next, depending on your mood or circumstances. Researchers studying this phenomenon have found that each recollection subtly overwrites the version that came before. Every time you try to know yourself, your mind rearranges the puzzle pieces. You might recall times when someone else remembered an event differently, offering details you were sure never happened. In those moments, you felt the quiet strangeness of realizing that your certainty was just another reconstruction. If you think of consciousness as a mosaic, you can see how each experience adds new tiles, and how old ones are sometimes moved or painted over. What you call identity is a pattern that keeps shifting, even as it feels stable from day to day. As you prepare to rest, consider that it's natural for your past to change shape. The mind is not a vault, but a living archive, always updating. And if tonight you find yourself revisiting an old memory, you can simply watch it unfold, knowing that each version is just one moment in the endless act of becoming. Imagine yourself sitting quietly in a familiar chair. The texture of the fabric, the way the light drifts across the walls, everything feels ordinary. But as you notice your thoughts, you sense something peculiar, a subtle distance between your awareness and the world itself. This is sometimes described as the floating bubble phenomenon, the feeling that you are not fully immersed in reality, but instead suspended slightly apart, like a silent observer drifting above your own experience. You see, hear, and think, but nothing seems to make contact with the deepest part of you. Philosophers and mystics have long reflected on this curious disconnection. Some traditions suggest that consciousness is never truly in the world at all. Instead, it is a transparent bubble of perception, an intangible vantage point that hovers behind your eyes, witnessing without ever quite belonging. Imagine yourself as a child, staring out the window of a moving car. The scenery glides past effortlessly, close enough to study, yet impossibly far away. Even then, you might have felt the hush of separation, this quiet certainty that your awareness was somewhere else, just beyond the reach of the road. Neuroscientists have tried to understand this phenomenon by studying how the brain constructs the sense of presence. Certain networks weave together touch, sight, and memory to create the impression of inhabiting a body. But even when those systems function perfectly, many people describe moments when reality seems thin and weightless, like a painted backdrop. Tonight, As you lie in the darkness and your breath slows, imagine your awareness as a clear sphere, floating gently, watching everything but touching nothing. Each sound arrives inside it. Each thought flickers across it, but the bubble itself remains unchanged. And perhaps this gentle separation is not a flaw or an accident. It may be the quiet vantage point from which you glimpse the mystery of being alive, forever near the world, yet never entirely of it. Imagine yourself sitting in a quiet space, the air still, your thoughts unhurried. You might sense that you are a stable self, someone consistent behind each moment of awareness. But the attention magnet paradox offers a gentler, stranger idea that what you call you may only be where your focus happens to land. Consider how attention works. A flicker of curiosity, the pull of a memory, the way your gaze settles on the smallest movement, each draws you in as if by invisible force. Wherever attention goes, the rest of consciousness seems to reorganize around it. You feel that the object of focus is important, meaningful, even central to who you are. Yet this feeling may be an illusion, created by attention's natural gravity. Imagine yourself watching a candle flame in a dim room. The warm glow captures your senses, and for a moment, you feel fully present, almost defined by the act of observing. But if a sudden sound arises, your awareness shifts, and the flame becomes irrelevant. Your sense of self follows effortlessly, attaching to the new moment as if it had always belonged there. Some contemplative traditions have noticed this fluidity for centuries. In certain strands of meditation, practitioners learn to watch attention moving from thought to thought, never resting. They discover that no fixed observer exists behind the movement, only the mind magnetized again and again by whatever is brightest, loudest, or most familiar. As you reflect on this, you might sense a quiet freedom. If identity is simply focus caught in motion, you don't have to hold every feeling so tightly. Attention will drift, and with it, the sensation of self will drift too. In this gentle rhythm, you can watch each moment arrive and dissolve, knowing that the gravity you feel may be nothing more than the mind's effortless attraction to whatever shines. Imagine yourself sitting before a small puppet stage. Strings trail down from your fingers, each one attached to a wooden figure. When you pull a thread, the puppet dances. You feel a quiet satisfaction, certain you are the one in control. But some philosophers suggest this confidence is only a comforting illusion. Consider how thoughts, feelings, and impulses often appear without your invitation. You plan to stay calm, yet irritation erupts. You intend to focus, but distraction drifts in. The mind quickly claims these events as deliberate, even when evidence suggests they arrive unannounced. Imagine for a moment that the strings you believe you hold are not connected to your conscious will at all. Beneath awareness, deeper mechanisms, instincts, memories, and hidden processes tug at the threads. Your sense of authorship becomes a story told afterward, explaining what was already in motion. Researchers studying decision-making have found signals in the brain that anticipate your choices before you feel you've made them. This timing hints that consciousness may be less a master and more a commentator, offering justifications to maintain the illusion of command. Imagine yourself observing these hidden hands at work, gently influencing each movement, each thought. If the mind is partly a puppet, then the experience of control is a delicate error, a necessary fiction that helps you navigate life without constant uncertainty. In that quiet recognition, you may glimpse something humbling. That certainty itself is woven from unseen threads, and the hand that guides them remains out of view. Imagine yourself sitting quietly, your breath soft and even. As you look around, it seems obvious that you see the world directly, the colors of the walls, the shape of your hands, the subtle shift of light. But some philosophers and scientists suggest something more unsettling, that your mind does not perceive reality itself. It only builds a model of it, a map without the territory. This idea traces back to early thinkers who noticed that perception depends on the senses, and senses can be fooled. The brain gathers signals from the eyes, ears, and skin, then assembles them into a seamless experience. Yet what you perceive is always one step removed, a reconstruction, never the thing itself. Modern neuroscience has confirmed this view. Experiments show that the brain fills in gaps, edits details, and creates consistency where none exists. When you look at an object, your mind predicts what it should be before you fully see it. The result feels immediate, but it is a simulation, an internal map shaped by memory, expectation, and attention. Imagine for a moment that every thought and sensation you have ever known is part of this map. The real territory, whatever it might be, remains hidden behind the model. Even your idea of yourself is drawn from this same process, stitched together from countless impressions. Some traditions find comfort in this. If you can never see reality in its pure form, perhaps there is freedom in accepting the limits of perception. You can let go of the need for certainty and rest in curiosity instead. As you sit here, notice the quiet space behind your thoughts. You don't have to reach beyond the map tonight. It is enough to see how the mind creates the world you walk through, moment by moment. Let yourself drift gently in that awareness, feeling the mystery of what lies beyond the edges of your understanding. Imagine yourself standing beside an ancient boulder, its surface worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. You place your hand on the cool stone and feel a quiet solidity beneath your palm. It seems lifeless, unmoving, unknowing. But consider for a moment that this stillness might not mean absence. It could be a different kind of awareness, unfolding on a timescale so vast you can barely sense it. Some philosophers and poets have wondered whether consciousness might exist in forms so slow or diffuse that we mistake them for inert. What if the stone beneath your hand is thinking, but each thought takes 100 years to complete? In recent years, scientists have found that life expresses itself in ways we once believed impossible. Microbes thriving in solid rock, communication among trees that spans decades. Perhaps consciousness itself is not bound to our quick pulses of perception. Perhaps your awareness is simply one frequency in a spectrum of sentience. You might recall moments when time seemed to slow, a long pause between heartbeats, the hush before dawn. In those instants, you can almost imagine what it would be like to think in centuries instead of seconds. Consider how a stone records the world without haste. It gathers heat and cold, pressure and erosion, layering experience in patterns no human eye can fully read. If it feels anything, it would be a feeling as patient as gravity itself. As you prepare to rest, you might find comfort in the idea that consciousness could be vaster than any mind has yet imagined. That your own swift awareness is just one expression of something more spacious and ancient. And if tonight you feel the urge to listen, you can imagine that somewhere in the darkness, the stone is listening too, keeping its slow, steady vigil as centuries drift past like a silent breeze. Imagine yourself sitting in a darkened theater. The hush settles over rows of empty seats, and on the wide screen before you, a story begins to unfold. At first, you recognize the faces, the settings, the patterns of thought and feeling. It all seems so vivid, so convincing that you forget you are watching at all. This is sometimes called the movie projection confusion, the idea that consciousness is not the story itself, nor the actor on the screen, but rather the quiet beam of awareness projecting the images into your mind. Over time, though, you start to believe that you are the character, that every plot twist and flicker of emotion is the whole of reality. Philosophers and contemplative traditions have long described this illusion. They suggest that the mind continuously mistakes the content of experience, the scenes and sensations, for the source of identity. Like a projector beam, consciousness remains unchanged no matter which images pass through it. Yet you become so absorbed in the narrative that you forget the light behind it. Imagine the projector itself, a small lamp glowing steadily in a metal box. It does not know or care what film is playing. A quiet romance, a sudden tragedy, a moment of triumph. Each story flickers across the same unblinking light. Modern neuroscience has found parallels in how the brain stitches together perceptions into a seamless sense of self. Networks of attention, memory, and emotion combine to create the impression of a single continuous character. But if you look closely, you might notice the gaps between frames, the places where the mind quietly resets, the projector beam pausing before casting the next moment onto the screen. Tonight, as you rest in the darkness and your breathing becomes slow and easy, imagine yourself stepping back from the story. Feel the space between you and the moving images. Perhaps you are not the scenes you see, nor the role you play. You are the quiet light that makes all of it visible, never altered, never exhausted, simply shining. Imagine yourself sitting in a hushed room, a place where each sound seems softened by distance. You may feel that your thoughts and feelings are fresh, appearing in real time. But the spiral memory self suggests that much of what you experience is not new at all. It is old memory returning in disguise. Consider how certain emotions repeat: a sudden sadness you can't explain, a familiar surge of hope. These feelings may seem connected to the present, yet they often trace back to memories laid down long ago. Consciousness might be less like a flowing river and more like a looping spiral, circling the same impressions with different names and faces. Imagine yourself walking through an orchard at dusk. The cool air carries the scent of ripe fruit, and something in you stirs, a blend of nostalgia and longing. Perhaps you've never been here before, yet the feeling is unmistakable. The spiral of memory rises, triggered by a shape, a sound, a fragment of a past you can't fully recall. Some contemplative traditions have observed how the mind revisits the same patterns. Ancient thinkers spoke of samskaras, impressions that settle into consciousness, shaping perception again and again. Modern psychology, too, notes how memories are not simply stored, but reactivated, subtly coloring each new moment. As you rest in this idea, notice how it can soften your sense of urgency. If thoughts and emotions are loops wearing different masks, you don't have to take each one as a unique truth. You can simply watch them spiral through awareness, like old melodies returning with new variations. And in this quiet recognition, you may feel a gentler curiosity, wondering what memories your consciousness will echo next. Imagine yourself walking through a familiar street. The air feels thick, almost unreal. A stranger passes, and for an instant, their face seems blurred, as though unfinished. You look away, then back, and everything snaps into focus. Moments like this can feel unsettling, as if reality itself just skipped a beat. Some thinkers suggest these brief dislocations might be more than quirks of perception. If the world you inhabit is a simulation, then consciousness could be sensitive to its hidden flaws. When the system refreshes or corrects an inconsistency, your awareness registers the disturbance, a glitch in the fabric of experience. Consider déjà vu, that sudden conviction you have lived this exact moment before, or the sense that time has stuttered, repeating a fragment of your day. Imagine your mind as a receiver tuned to the simulation's broadcast. When a patch is applied or a scene is reloaded, the signal flickers, leaving you briefly unmoored. You might recall times when a conversation seemed to reset or an object wasn't where you left it. Though easily dismissed, these experiences often carry a peculiar weight, as if your awareness glimpsed the machinery behind the curtain. Some theories propose that consciousness itself is not fully contained within the simulation. Instead, your awareness could originate elsewhere, observing from a vantage point outside the rendered world. When the simulation stumbles, that outside perspective leaks through, like light around the edges of a closed door. Imagine for a moment that these glitches are not errors, but quiet invitations to question what you call reality. In their gentle disruption, you may sense that existence is far stranger and more fragile than it seems. Imagine yourself sitting quietly, your breath slow and gentle. You may feel like your mind is something private, sealed off from other people. But some scientists suggest a different possibility, that consciousness itself could have emerged from the ability to reflect what others feel. This is sometimes called the mirror cell hypothesis. It centers on mirror neurons, special cells in the brain that activate when you watch someone else act or express emotion. If you see a person smile, these neurons fire as if you were smiling yourself. They let you share, in a quiet way, the inner life of another being. Researchers first discovered mirror neurons while studying monkeys. They noticed that certain brain cells lit up both when a monkey grasped an object and when it watched another do the same. Later studies in humans showed similar patterns, suggesting that our brains are wired for imitation. But some thinkers have taken this further. They propose that empathy, not abstract thought, could be the root of consciousness. Long before humans wrote stories or built cities, they relied on understanding each other's intentions and feelings. Imitation created a shared space, a place where awareness could grow. Imagine for a moment that your sense of self is not a solitary spark, but a reflection of countless encounters. Each gesture you learned as a child, each face you watched carefully, helped shape your mind into what it is now. In this view, consciousness is less about isolation and more about connection, a living mirror held up to the world. As you rest here, notice the quiet hum of your own awareness. Perhaps in this stillness, you can sense all the unseen threads that link you to others. Let yourself drift gently in the thought that every mind is shaped by other minds, each reflecting and deepening the next. You don't have to solve the mystery tonight. It is enough to feel the simple wonder of being part of something shared. Imagine yourself walking along a familiar path. The breeze touches your skin, countless scents drift through the air, and countless tiny sounds hum at the edge of hearing. Yet you notice only a handful of these sensations. Your attention latches onto the crunch of gravel underfoot or the thought you were carrying from home. Scientists have found that your brain filters out almost all incoming information, more than 99%. If it didn't, the sheer volume of data would overwhelm you. What you call consciousness is not a perfect record of reality, but a carefully edited highlight reel, shaped by what your mind deems important or simply convenient to notice. Consider how your eyes constantly shift and refocus, yet you don't see the gaps between glances. Your hearing adjusts to ignore the background hum of appliances, the steady rhythm of your own breath. All around you, signals are quietly discarded before they ever reach awareness. Researchers studying attention have discovered that even when you feel certain you're observing everything clearly, your perception is riddled with omissions and substitutions. The mind fills in blanks to create the illusion of a seamless world. You might recall moments when you overlooked something obvious, a misplaced key, a familiar face in an unexpected place. In those instances, you briefly glimpsed how selective your awareness truly is. If you think of consciousness as a stream, it is one that flows around countless hidden channels. What feels like the whole story is only the portion that survives the filtering, a focused error stream that makes reality manageable, if incomplete. As you prepare to rest, consider the possibility that this quiet editing is not a flaw, but a gentle adaptation. And if tonight you notice a detail you usually miss, you can simply watch it pass by, knowing it is just one ripple in a vast, unseen sea. Imagine yourself standing before a still pond at dawn. You lean closer, studying the reflection that appears in the shifting water. It seems solid, your features outlined by soft light, your expression gently mirrored back to you. But if no surface existed to reflect your image, how would you ever know you were there at all? This is the idea behind the reverse reflection loop, the notion that consciousness may not be a private lantern shining out into the world, but rather a phenomenon arising when the world shines back. In this view, you exist not as an independent observer, but as something assembled each time you are seen, acknowledged, or remembered by others. Imagine how often you look to the people around you to feel real. A nod of recognition, a shared glance, the warmth of a familiar voice calling your name, each moment a small mirror returning your sense of self. Without these reflections, your identity can feel thin and weightless, like an outline waiting to be colored in. Philosophers have long wondered whether awareness truly resides inside the skull or if it depends on a web of social signals. In many cultures, the idea of the self is not a solitary point, but a process unfolding between people, a continuous exchange of observation and response. Even neuroscience hints at this dynamic. Networks in your brain light up differently when you are alone versus when you sense you are being watched. Something in you comes alive under the gaze of another, as if perception itself needs an echo to be fully formed. Tonight, as you lie in the quiet darkness and your breathing slows, imagine the countless reflections that have shaped you. A parent's watchful eyes, a friend's attentive listening, even the silent regard of strangers. Perhaps consciousness is not a light shining outward, but a gentle glow that appears when the world gazes back. And in this loop of observation, you find the contours of who you are, existing only when you are seen. Imagine yourself in a quiet library, the air dense with the scent of old paper and polished wood. You might like to think of your mind as a well-ordered collection, each memory carefully labeled and placed exactly where it belongs. But the filing clerk problem suggests a humbler, more human reality. Consciousness may be more like a cluttered archive room, with a tired clerk doing their best to keep track of it all. Consider how memories often surface in unexpected ways. A stray scent might unlock a scene you haven't thought of in years, though the details are blurred or rearranged. Or you recall a conversation but can't be sure when it happened, or even if it happened quite the way you remember. The mind's filing system isn't precise. It creates impressions rather than exact records, guessing at names, dates, and meanings. Imagine yourself leafing through a stack of mismatched folders, each labeled in the clerk's hurried handwriting. Some experiences are filed under the wrong heading, a childhood fear placed among adult disappointments, an old success misfiled as an embarrassment. Yet when you retrieve these memories, you trust them as if they were the truth. Ancient philosophers often noted how unreliable memory can be. The Stoics observed that impressions are colored by emotion, mood, and expectation. Modern psychology has confirmed that recollection is reconstructive, more like storytelling than playback. Each time you remember, the tired clerk must piece together fragments, sometimes inventing connections to fill the gaps. As you reflect on this idea, you might feel a gentle softening of certainty. If your consciousness is an imperfect archive, you need not believe every recollection or conclusion so completely. You can simply watch the filing clerk work, sometimes carefully, sometimes carelessly, and rest in the knowledge that the archive was never meant to be flawless. Imagine yourself holding a small, pale feather between your fingers. It feels almost weightless, so delicate you can barely sense its presence. Yet, as you watch, a bright ember touches its edge. In an instant, flame curls across the soft barbs, consuming them with a silent urgency. Some philosophers have compared consciousness to this paradox, a thing so light it seems insubstantial, yet powerful enough to transform everything it touches. Awareness drifts through each moment like a feather, impossible to pin down, and yet it burns through experience, leaving nothing unchanged. Consider how a single thought can ignite an entire day. A memory surfaces, and suddenly your mood shifts. A stray worry flares, consuming your calm. Though you feel consciousness as an observer, passive and airy, it quietly sets fire to each perception. Imagine yourself sitting in stillness, watching thoughts rise and fade. You might believe they have little power, but over time, they leave deep marks, charred traces that shape who you become. In this view, consciousness is not merely a lens, but a spark, delicate and dangerous. Some traditions teach that the mind's true nature is always just out of reach, like a flame you can see but never grasp. When you try to hold it, it slips away, leaving only the evidence of its heat. In this quiet paradox, you may glimpse something humbling, that your awareness feels weightless because it is vast, too subtle to measure, yet strong enough to consume every thought, every memory, every moment it touches. And like the feather on fire, it is both beautiful and impossible to contain. Imagine yourself sitting quietly, your breath slow and steady. You might sense something solid within you, a steady core that feels like the true center of who you are. But some philosophers and contemplative traditions suggest something more unsettling. They propose that when you look closely, this center disappears. What you find is not a thing, but an absence, a hollow space that cannot be touched. This idea is sometimes called the hollow core truth. It suggests that consciousness isn't an object you can locate or examine. Instead, it is more like an infinite whole, wrapped in layers of thought, feeling, and memory. Each time you try to grasp it, you find nothing to hold on to. Ancient teachings in Buddhism describe this as sunyata, or emptiness. They taught that what we call a self is just a collection of changing experiences, sensations, images, and stories, held together by habit. When you look past these layers, there is no hidden essence waiting to be discovered. Modern neuroscience, too, has never found a center. Brain scans reveal patterns of activity, networks lighting up in response to perception and memory, but no single place where consciousness lives. Each part points to another, like mirrors reflecting one another endlessly. Imagine for a moment that your awareness is a circle drawn around nothing. All your thoughts and feelings orbit this open space. Even the question, "Who am I?" is just another ripple across the surface. As you rest here, notice the quiet between your thoughts. Perhaps there is a kind of freedom in realizing you don't have to fill that emptiness. It does not need an answer to exist. It simply is, a vast, clear space where everything appears and passes away. Let yourself drift gently in this awareness. You don't need to solve the mystery tonight. It is enough to feel the hollow core within you, calm and unafraid. Imagine yourself sitting quietly, watching shadows shift across the floor. You feel time unfolding, second by second, moment by moment. It seems so natural, so certain, that there is a clear now, flowing smoothly from past to future. But physics suggests this certainty is an illusion, a delicate mirage your mind weaves to keep you oriented in a world that doesn't truly move the way you feel it does. Einstein once described time as a landscape rather than a river. The past, present, and future all coexist, spread across the fabric of space-time like a vast terrain. From this perspective, your experience of now is no more fundamental than a line drawn on a map. Consider how your brain stitches together countless flickers of perception, sights, sounds, sensations, to create the impression of a continuous stream. Each moment you feel is built from signals arriving at slightly different times, woven into a story of seamless motion. Researchers have found that consciousness operates in small temporal windows, collecting fragments of experience and arranging them into the illusion of flow. What you call the present is really a composite, layered across instants that never quite touch. You might recall moments when time seemed to stretch, a heartbeat slowing during a sudden shock, or when hours vanished in a breath as you were absorbed in thought. These shifts hint at how malleable your sense of time can be. If you think of awareness as a tapestry, it is one that must be constantly repaired, patched and smoothed so you never see the gaps between moments. The feeling of now is a comforting hallucination, one that helps you navigate a reality far stranger than it appears. As you prepare to rest, consider that each moment you cherish is a quiet illusion, no less real for being assembled from fragments. And if tonight you sense time drifting in unexpected ways, you can simply watch it unfold, knowing you are witnessing the gentle mirage that makes experience possible. Imagine yourself sitting quietly, eyes closed, feeling the soft rhythm of your breath. In this stillness, it seems there is a stable center, a you, watching thoughts rise and fall. This sense of a singular witness feels undeniable, as natural as the warmth of your own skin. But what if it is only the brain's most elegant illusion? This idea is sometimes called the brain's best lie, the notion that consciousness itself is a carefully crafted story, a convincing hallucination woven by countless neural circuits. Evolution may have shaped this illusion to help you survive, creating a narrative of selfhood to protect, defend, and sustain. Imagine your brain as an artist, tirelessly painting layer upon layer of impressions. Sensations, memories, and emotions combine into a seamless portrait of identity. Yet, if you look closely, you will see the brushstrokes, the tiny, separate signals that your awareness stitches together into a convincing whole. Philosophers and neuroscientists have traced how this illusion arises. There is no single place in the brain where you resides. Instead, networks of perception, attention, and memory cooperate to create a model of self that feels continuous and real. Picture a puppet moving gracefully on invisible strings. The movements look intentional, guided by a hidden will. But in truth, they are the product of countless tiny mechanisms, each unaware of the larger dance. In the same way, your consciousness may be an emergent performance, an unbroken story crafted to make existence coherent. Some contemplative traditions have long suspected this. They teach that the self is only a temporary arrangement of thoughts and sensations, a pattern mistaken for something solid. Tonight, as you lie in the dark and your mind grows quiet, imagine the possibility that there is no enduring you behind the curtain, only the soft, brilliant illusion of one. And perhaps, in recognizing the brain's best lie, you glimpse a kind of freedom, the chance to rest in the mystery, without needing a story to hold it all together. Imagine yourself sitting in a dim room, the hush so complete you can almost hear your own thoughts arriving. In that stillness, you might notice a kind of mental background noise, fleeting images, half-formed phrases, vague impressions you didn't invite. The cosmic static model suggests that this noise may not be yours at all. It could be the universe itself, whispering through your awareness like distant radio signals. Consider how thoughts sometimes appear unbidden. A memory you never meant to recall, an image that makes no sense, a feeling with no clear source. You might assume these are simply the mind's private echoes, but what if your consciousness is more like a receiver, tuned to signals beyond your own experience? Imagine yourself holding an old radio, its dial slowly turning. Between clear stations, there is always static, faint voices and melodies bleeding through. Your awareness could work the same way, blending your personal memories with a broader field of impressions that don't belong to any single person. Some contemplative traditions have hinted at this possibility. Mystics have described consciousness as a shared medium, an endless ocean of impressions that any mind can momentarily catch. Modern theories of emergence and complexity also suggest that individual awareness might arise from larger patterns we barely comprehend. As you rest in this idea, notice how it softens the boundary between self and world. If consciousness is partly cosmic static, then not every thought requires explanation or ownership. You can simply observe each signal, some clear, some confusing, and let them drift across awareness without needing to claim them. In this gentle space, you may feel a quiet curiosity about what other frequencies your mind will tune to next. Imagine yourself sitting at a small desk with a leather-bound journal. Each moment, your mind writes a line, recording what you see, think, and feel. But as soon as the words appear, invisible hands begin tearing out the pages. By the end of the day, only a handful remain, fragments you call memory. Neuroscientists have long known that most of your experiences vanish almost as soon as they happen. Consciousness feels like a steady narrative, a continuous account of your life. Yet in truth, it is more like a rough draft, edited and rewritten by processes you never see. Consider how you recall yesterday's breakfast or a conversation last week. Details blur, replaced by impressions and guesses. Your mind quietly stitches gaps together, filling in missing scenes so the story feels complete. What survives isn't the truth of experience, but the version that seems most coherent. Imagine for a moment that every memory you treasure has been edited this way. Each time you revisit it, you revise it further, polishing some parts, discarding others, blending imagination with fact. Over years, the original page is long gone, replaced by copies of copies. Some philosophers suggest this is the mind's greatest illusion, believing it holds a faithful record when it is really inventing as it goes. Awareness becomes the storyteller who can never admit how much has been forgotten. In this gentle uncertainty, you might discover something humbling. The story you carry isn't final or exact. It is simply the best guess, a handful of surviving pages from a book mostly torn away. And perhaps that is enough. Imagine yourself sitting quietly, your breath soft and even. As you look around or recall your day, everything seems full of meaning. A familiar voice, the curve of handwriting, a memory that stirs your chest. Each feels important, part of a larger pattern. But some philosophers suggest this certainty is only a trick. Your mind may be a meaning generator, tirelessly weaving purpose into what could be random events. This idea is sometimes called the meaning generator trick. It proposes that consciousness is not satisfied with empty experience. Instead, it constantly searches for connections, reasons, and stories, even if they aren't really there. Ancient thinkers noticed this impulse in myth-making. Faced with unpredictable storms or illness, people invented spirits and hidden causes to explain what frightened them. Modern psychology has given this process a name: patternicity. The brain is tuned to detect patterns quickly because doing so once helped our ancestors survive, but the same instinct can make us see order in pure chance. Neuroscience shows that regions of the brain responsible for prediction and emotion often activate together. When something unexpected happens, the mind rushes to fill the gap, stitching a story that feels solid. Yet if you look closely, the seams begin to show. Imagine for a moment that your thoughts are like a projector, casting images onto a blank wall. The shapes appear real and vivid, but the surface underneath remains empty. Even your idea of who you are may be just another story, useful, but not necessarily true. As you rest here, notice the quiet space between your thoughts. Perhaps you don't need every experience to carry a hidden lesson. It can be enough to sit with what is, without decoration. Let yourself drift gently in this awareness. In the end, you may find a different kind of meaning in simply being here, present and unhurried. Imagine yourself sitting quietly, your breath soft and even. As you look around or recall your day, everything seems full of meaning. A familiar voice, the curve of handwriting, a memory that stirs your chest. Each feels important, part of a larger pattern. But some philosophers suggest this certainty is only a trick. Your mind may be a meaning generator, tirelessly weaving purpose into what could be random events. This idea is sometimes called the meaning generator trick. It proposes that consciousness is not satisfied with empty experience. Instead, it constantly searches for connections, reasons, and stories, even if they aren't really there. Ancient thinkers noticed this impulse in myth-making. Faced with unpredictable storms or illness, people invented spirits and hidden causes to explain what frightened them. Modern psychology has given this process a name: patternicity. The brain is tuned to detect patterns quickly because doing so once helped our ancestors survive. But the same instinct can make us see order in pure chance. Neuroscience shows that regions of the brain responsible for prediction and emotion often activate together. When something unexpected happens, the mind rushes to fill the gap, stitching a story that feels solid. Yet if you look closely, the seams begin to show. Imagine for a moment that your thoughts are like a projector, casting images onto a blank wall. The shapes appear real and vivid, but the surface underneath remains empty. Even your idea of who you are may be just another story, useful, but not necessarily true. As you rest here, notice the quiet space between your thoughts. Perhaps you don't need every experience to carry a hidden lesson. It can be enough to sit with what is, without decoration. Let yourself drift gently in this awareness. In the end, you may find a different kind of meaning in simply being here, present and unhurried. Imagine yourself standing before a small table, reaching for a glass of water. It feels as though your decision arose in a clear, deliberate moment. I will pick this up now. But hidden beneath that certainty, something stranger is happening. Neuroscientists studying decision-making have discovered a puzzling sequence. Your brain often initiates an action before you become aware you have chosen it. Subtle patterns of neural activity begin building several hundred milliseconds before you feel the impulse to act. By the time you notice the intention, the process is already underway. This is sometimes called the reverse engineering lie. Consciousness, rather than leading, follows behind, like a storyteller rushing to explain a plot that has already been written. You reach for the glass, and only afterward does your awareness weave a tidy explanation. I wanted water because I was thirsty. Imagine yourself as an observer inside your own mind. You watch decisions appear fully formed, accompanied by reasons that feel convincing. But these justifications are often stitched together after the fact, a kind of quiet rationalization meant to preserve the illusion of control. Philosophers and psychologists have long questioned whether free will can survive this revelation. If consciousness is not the origin of choice but merely its interpreter, then what becomes of the self who claims to be in charge? Picture your awareness as a narrator trailing behind each action, scribbling explanations in the margins. This narrator believes it authors the story, yet the sentences are already written, line by line, before the ink touches the page. Tonight, as you lie in the darkness and your breath slows, consider this possibility. Perhaps you are not the commander of your life, but the gentle historian, gathering fragments of intention and arranging them into something that feels whole. And in that realization, there may be a quiet freedom too, the chance to step back from the burden of authorship and simply watch the story unfold. Imagine yourself sitting quietly, the room around you bathed in soft light. You feel undeniably here, solid, real, and present in this moment. But the illusion of presence suggests this feeling may not be as profound as it seems. It could simply be what happens when your senses happen to line up, creating the impression of a self that is fully alive. Consider how sight, sound, and touch all arrive as separate streams. When they synchronize, when the warmth of your hands matches what you see and the hush of the room, your mind stitches them together into a single experience called now. This alignment feels vivid and true, yet it may be no deeper than a brief agreement among signals. Imagine yourself walking along a quiet path at dawn. You hear birdsong, smell damp earth, feel the chill on your skin. In those moments, you sense that you are here, witnessing it all. But perhaps this presence is only a pattern, your nervous system blending inputs just long enough to create the sensation of wholeness. Some contemplative traditions have noticed how fragile this feeling can be. A single distraction, a moment of confusion, and the sense of presence dissolves. Modern neuroscience also suggests that consciousness relies on timing. If sensory signals fall out of sync by even a fraction of a second, the seamless experience of being here can vanish. As you let this idea settle, notice how it softens the need to grasp so tightly to each moment. If presence is merely an alignment of inputs, then the feeling of being alive is a delicate rhythm rather than a fixed reality. You can simply watch as it comes together and falls apart, knowing that what you call you may be no more and no less than the brief harmony of your senses. Imagine yourself standing on the edge of a vast plain, watching a storm approach. Dark clouds churn overhead, winds gather in spiraling currents, and rain begins to fall in heavy sheets. You feel certain you are separate from this spectacle, an observer, sheltered and apart. But some philosophers suggest this feeling of distance is an illusion. What if you are not the one witnessing the storm, but the storm itself? In this view, consciousness is not a detached spectator perched behind the eyes. It is the swirling field of sensations, thoughts, and emotions unfolding moment by moment. Consider how awareness never seems to rest in one place. Attention drifts from a memory to a feeling, from a plan to a sound, always in motion. You might imagine there is an I orchestrating these shifts, but look closely and that center dissolves. What remains is the flux, experience arising without a fixed point behind it. Imagine yourself closing your eyes, breathing slowly. Thoughts pass like gusts of wind. Feelings rise and recede like waves. In this quiet observation, you may sense there is no solid core, only patterns that appear and vanish. Some traditions call this the inverted identity, the recognition that you are not the experiencer, but the experience itself. The I you defend and describe is simply a label for the storm, an attempt to pin down what can never be fully contained. In this perspective, there is a gentle freedom. You are not confined to a tiny watcher behind your thoughts. You are the shifting weather of consciousness, vast and unpredictable. And perhaps, in accepting this, you find a kind of peace, knowing you were never apart from the storm at all. Imagine yourself sitting very still, your breath slow and quiet. You may sense your awareness as something immediate, a voice speaking from the center of your mind. But some thinkers and mystics have wondered if this sense of presence is actually an echo. What you call consciousness might be a delayed signal, bouncing across unseen distances, arriving only after its source has already passed. This idea is sometimes called the echo signal delay. It suggests that awareness is not the first note, but the reverberation, the lingering trace of something more original. Perhaps the thoughts you experience are not produced in the moment you notice them. They could be waves crossing dimensions of time or space, rippling through the hidden fabric of reality. In modern neuroscience, researchers have discovered that perception is never instant. It takes fractions of a second for signals to travel from your senses to the brain and finally into awareness. By the time you register a sound or glimpse a shape, it has already moved on. Your experience is always a little behind. Ancient philosophies also hinted at this delay. In some contemplative traditions, the self was described as a reflection, a shimmering image in a pool that seems real but dissolves if you reach for it. If consciousness is an echo, then perhaps what you are is not the sound itself, but the space it resonates through. Imagine your awareness as a great hall, empty and silent, until a signal arrives to fill it. Each thought, sensation, and memory is just one more vibration passing through, leaving a temporary impression. As you sit here, notice the gentle rhythm of your breath. Let the idea drift through your mind without needing to grasp it fully. You don't have to know the source of the echo. It is enough to feel it moving across the quiet space within you, soft and unhurried. Imagine yourself alone in a quiet room. The air feels still, almost expectant. You take a slow breath, and for a moment, you sense a subtle emptiness, like an outline of something that should be there but isn't. It's a feeling many people have known, the sense that part of you is missing, a hidden piece you can't quite name. Some philosophers suggest this feeling isn't an illusion or a flaw. It may be the true shape of consciousness itself, a kind of incompleteness that no experience can fully satisfy. Consider how often you've felt a quiet longing, even in moments of contentment. You might recall a day when everything seemed fine, yet a faint ache lingered beneath the surface, as if awareness was haunted by an absence you couldn't describe. Researchers studying the mind have found that the brain creates a model of the self, a map of who you believe you are. But like any map, it leaves spaces uncharted, regions that never formed into memories, dreams that never took shape. Those empty places can feel like missing pieces, even if you've never known what was meant to fill them. In some traditions, this incompleteness is not a problem to solve, but a quiet doorway into wonder. If you were always whole, you might never feel the pull to grow, connect, or search for meaning beyond yourself. You might think of awareness as a puzzle that remains unfinished, no matter how many pieces you find. The gaps are not mistakes. They are part of what makes you human, a reminder that identity is always evolving, always reaching for something just out of view. As you prepare to rest, consider the possibility that the missing piece you feel is not a flaw, but an invitation. And if tonight you sense that quiet absence again, you can simply sit with it, knowing it belongs to you as much as anything ever has. Imagine yourself standing alone in a quiet room. The walls seem steady, the floor solid beneath your feet. For a moment, you feel sure of your balance, certain that the world holds still around you. But then, with the smallest disruption, a sudden turn, a change in pressure behind your ears, everything begins to tilt and swirl. This is the spinning room phenomenon, the sensation that the environment has broken free of its ordinary calm and become something unpredictable. Dizziness feels like an invasion, an error in the brain's delicate machinery for maintaining equilibrium. But some philosophers and neuroscientists have wondered whether this moment is not an aberration, but a glimpse of what is always true. Consider how your inner ear constantly measures motion, how your brain filters an endless flood of conflicting signals from vision, touch, and gravity. Even when you feel still, your body is in motion, your heart pulsing, your eyes making small, rapid adjustments, the earth itself rotating beneath you. Imagine that your consciousness is less a passive witness and more an active stabilizer. It selects which sensory fragments to privilege, smoothing them into a story called stillness. In this view, the calm solidity you trust is a kind of gentle deception, a necessary simplification to keep you oriented in a world that never actually stops moving. Picture yourself spinning in a slow circle with your eyes closed. The moment you open them, your awareness struggles to reconcile competing inputs. The familiar illusion of steadiness slips away, replaced by a more honest chaos. Tonight, as you lie in the darkness and your breath becomes slow and steady, consider that stillness itself may be a story your mind tells, a quiet fiction to hold back the whirl of sensations. And perhaps in those brief, disorienting moments when the room seems to spin, you are not losing touch with reality, but catching a fleeting glimpse of how unsteady it has always been. Imagine yourself sitting in a quiet space, the air still and expectant. You feel grounded, tethered to a clear sense of who you are. But the anchored soul theory suggests this feeling of stability might depend on something more fragile than you realize. Your consciousness could need emotional anchors, attachments to memories, relationships, and beliefs, to keep from unraveling into confusion. Consider how certain feelings act as steadying weights. A memory of being loved, a sense of purpose, the reassurance of belonging to something larger. These experiences create an emotional ballast that helps you stay oriented. When life is calm, the anchors hold firm, and you feel centered. But when they slip, when loss or change weakens them, the self can feel adrift, as though the currents of thought might scatter you in every direction. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a wide, dark lake. The surface is smooth, but beneath it, unseen currents tug at anything unmoored. In much the same way, your mind may rely on emotional ties you seldom notice until they fray. Throughout history, people have turned to rituals and shared stories to reinforce these hidden anchors. Ancient philosophers spoke of cultivating virtue and devotion to withstand the storms of uncertainty. Modern psychology, too, recognizes how fragile identity can become when connections weaken. As you reflect on this idea, you might feel a quiet compassion for yourself. If your sense of being grounded depends on these delicate anchors, it is natural to feel unsteady when they shift. You can simply notice the feeling, neither resisting nor clinging, allowing each moment of certainty or doubt to rise and pass like a small wave. And in this gentle awareness, you may discover that the anchors are never entirely gone, only drifting until they find their hold again. Imagine yourself seated in a quiet room, the world outside hushed and distant. With each breath, your thoughts begin to slow, scattering like leaves in a gentle wind. In deep meditation, the usual stream of worries, plans, and memories fades away, leaving a wide and silent space. Some ancient traditions teach that beneath all mental activity, there is an unchanging witness, a silent observer that notices every sensation, every fleeting thought, without being touched by them. You might picture this presence as a still pool, perfectly reflecting whatever appears, yet never disturbed by the ripples on its surface. As you sit in stillness, you may notice a peculiar clarity. No words or images fill the mind. What remains is a simple awareness, effortless, undirected, quietly watching. It is neither excitement nor boredom, neither happiness nor sorrow, but something more fundamental, the capacity to experience itself. Consider how rare these moments are when the mind's usual noise falls silent. Most of the time, consciousness is cluttered with commentary, impulses, and opinions. But in this deep quiet, there is only presence, the observer that watches all, content to simply exist. Some philosophies suggest this is the core of consciousness, not the thoughts or emotions that come and go, but the witnessing itself. The rest, they say, is just the noise of the mind, a story layered over the truth of awareness. In this quiet, you may sense something both ancient and immediate, a stillness that is always here, patiently observing, no matter what the mind imagines. And perhaps, in recognizing this, you glimpse the one real consciousness, the observer that watches all, quietly awake behind every moment. Imagine yourself resting quietly, breath moving softly in and out. You may think of your mind as a seeker, curious, always searching for answers, wanting to understand the world and your place in it. But some philosophers and psychologists suggest that beneath this search for truth is something even more basic, the pursuit of sensation. This is sometimes called the thrill response driver. It suggests that consciousness is less about understanding and more about feeling, chasing newness, novelty, and stimulation. The mind, always active, may simply be tuned to seek out whatever gives a little spark, a subtle rush, even if it's dressed up as the quest for knowledge. Throughout history, people have been drawn to stories, mysteries, and challenges, not only to learn, but because these things excite the brain. When you discover something new or solve a puzzle, your body releases small surges of dopamine, the chemical behind reward and pleasure. The mind learns to crave that thrill, returning again and again to ideas, questions, and even fears just for the sensation they bring. Neuroscience has shown that this reward circuitry is deeply woven into consciousness. Attention is pulled not just by what is true, but by what is stimulating, what surprises, shocks, or excites. In this view, the search for meaning may be a kind of gentle addiction, with awareness always looking for its next fix of feeling. Imagine for a moment that your mind is less a philosopher and more an explorer, chasing the next bright light on the horizon. As you notice this, you don't need to judge or resist it. Let your thoughts pass by, each one a spark in the gentle dusk. Rest in this awareness. It's enough to notice the movement without needing to answer every question or to seek out every thrill. Sometimes, simply being is the most peaceful sensation of all. Imagine yourself sitting in perfect stillness. Your breath slows, and the usual chatter of thoughts begins to fade. The room around you feels larger, almost endless, as if the walls have pulled back to reveal a deeper quiet. For a moment, you wonder what would happen if every thought vanished. Would you remain, or would you dissolve into the silence? Some philosophers and mystics have suggested that consciousness might not be a steady flame, but a flicker that needs fuel. Each thought, memory, or sensation is like a log tossed on a fire, briefly illuminating the mind, keeping the sense of you alive. When the stream of thoughts dries up, what is left behind? You may recall rare moments of deep calm, staring at a blank wall, or losing yourself in the sound of gentle rain, when awareness felt thin, almost transparent. In those pauses, identity becomes harder to grasp, as if you are a presence with no shape, waiting for the next ripple to give it form. Researchers who study meditation have found that as the mind grows quiet, the boundaries of the self soften. People describe feeling empty yet peaceful, aware yet impossible to define. In these gaps, consciousness does not vanish, but it loses its familiar outline, no longer fueled by the chaos of sensation and thought. Consider that your sense of self might be a response to noise, a pattern that emerges only when the mind is busy. Like a sinkhole that forms where the ground once felt solid, a silence reveals a hollow space beneath the surface. As you prepare to rest, you might wonder if true awareness is the silence itself, or if it only lives in the flicker of experience. And if tonight you find your mind growing quiet, you can simply drift in the pause, curious, weightless, and at peace with whatever remains. Imagine yourself drifting near the edge of a vast, silent sea. Floating on the water is an iceberg, bright, sculpted by wind and sun, its peak glinting in the quiet light. Above the surface, all seems solid and clear, yet you know, even without seeing, that most of the iceberg lies beneath, immense and invisible. This is the iceberg mind mystery. What you call consciousness, your stream of thoughts, memories, and intentions, is only the tip. Beneath the surface, countless processes unfold, sensations filtered, emotions brewing, patterns recognized, decisions nudged by experiences you do not recall. Modern neuroscience confirms this old intuition. At any moment, your brain is alive with hidden activity, regulating the rhythm of your heart, managing balance, suppressing distractions, even shaping the words you're about to speak before you notice them. The conscious mind observes only a thin sliver of this immense machinery. Imagine how many times you have felt a sudden emotion without knowing its cause, or solved a problem seemingly by accident, the answer emerging unbidden. These moments hint at the hidden depths from which awareness draws. Psychologists have long described consciousness as a spotlight, sweeping across the stage of the mind, illuminating only what's needed. The rest of the stage remains busy, rearranging sets and props just out of view. Picture yourself now, lying quietly in the darkness, your breath steady and slow. Thoughts drift by, some clear, some shadowy, some never fully reaching the surface. Perhaps the mind is less a single room and more an endless ocean, most of its motion silent, most of its history unknown. And in this gentle awareness, you may find comfort. The tip is enough to guide you, even as the true depths remain mysterious, supporting you in ways you rarely see. Imagine yourself in a quiet room where your thoughts drift softly like distant echoes. You might feel that your mind is a single steady voice, clear and consistent. But the split mind echo suggests a different picture. That consciousness is not one unified presence, but a chorus of voices, sometimes harmonizing, sometimes clashing in subtle debate. Consider how often you find yourself wrestling with opposing urges or ideas. One moment, a part of you urges caution. The next, another pushes toward risk. You can carry on a conversation with yourself, weighing options, doubting decisions, or replaying memories from different angles. This inner dialogue reveals that your awareness may be a gathering of distinct voices rather than a singular self. Imagine a chamber filled with many instruments, strings, winds, percussion, each playing its own melody. Sometimes they blend into a harmonious whole. Other times they compete, creating tension and release. Your mind could be much the same, a layered symphony of perspectives, emotions, and impulses weaving together the fabric of your experience. Philosophers and psychologists have long noted this fracturing of the self. Early thinkers spoke of the soul as divided, while modern neuroscience shows how different brain regions can generate conflicting thoughts and feelings simultaneously. As you reflect on this, you might find comfort in the complexity. If consciousness is a chorus rather than a solo, then inner conflict is not failure, but part of a rich, ongoing dialogue. You can simply listen to each voice as it arises, observing the interplay without needing to choose a single leader. In this gentle awareness, the mind's echoes become a dynamic, living conversation, always shifting, never fixed. Imagine yourself at a gathering, shifting easily from one conversation to another. With a colleague, your words become careful, measured. With an old friend, your tone relaxes, humor returns. Alone, you notice your inner dialogue takes on a different rhythm. Each setting brings out a new you, distinct, yet all somehow convincing. Some psychologists suggest your mind runs like a flexible program, loading different personas depending on the context. Your job, your family, your memories, each activates its own set of traits, values, and habits. Every role feels genuine while you're in it, as if there's a single self behind them. But look closer, and you may see how often the real you shifts with circumstance. Consider how your voice changes naturally to match the company you keep. You might speak more softly in a quiet room, more boldly in a crowd. Your gestures, posture, even your beliefs can subtly adapt. It's as if your consciousness is not one continuous entity, but a runtime environment, hosting various programs, each designed for a particular moment. Imagine sitting quietly and watching these personas arise and dissolve. There's no single master program, just a series of responses tuned to the situation at hand. When the context shifts, a new mask appears, seamless and believable. Some traditions suggest that what you call your identity is only a collection of roles, performed so well they seem to blend together. In this view, consciousness is not the actor, but the stage, allowing each mask to take the spotlight before yielding to the next. And perhaps, in recognizing this, you discover a gentle freedom, the ability to play each part fully, knowing that no mask is ever the whole story. Imagine yourself walking through an ordinary day, thoughts drifting quietly as you move from one routine to the next. Suddenly, a strange coincidence occurs. A friend calls just as you think of them, or you see the same unusual word 3 times in one afternoon. In these moments of synchronicity, something in your awareness seems to sharpen. The world feels charged, as if you're at the center of a hidden pattern, and consciousness itself becomes more vivid. Some psychologists and philosophers suggest that these spikes in meaning are more than tricks of chance. When the expected order breaks, your mind lights up, searching for a story or message in the randomness. This is sometimes called the coincidence consciousness spike, the idea that awareness is not steady and even, but surges into life when logic stumbles and surprise enters the scene. Ancient traditions described similar experiences as omens or signs from the universe. Today, neuroscience reveals that the brain is tuned to notice and remember anomalies. When something improbable happens, networks for attention, emotion, and memory all activate at once, intensifying your sense of presence. The ordinary fades, and the extraordinary stands out in sharp relief. Imagine for a moment that your awareness is like the surface of a calm lake. Most days, thoughts ripple gently, predictable and quiet. But when a coincidence drops in, it's like a stone thrown suddenly. Consciousness expands outward, alert and awake. As you sit here, reflect on how those moments have shaped your story. Notice the quiet space between events, and let yourself rest in the idea that sometimes meaning grows brightest when the pattern breaks. You don't need to explain every coincidence. It is enough to feel the gentle surge of awareness, alive and attentive, whenever the world surprises you. Imagine yourself wandering through the quiet corridors of your mind. Some rooms are open and well lit, filled with memories you visit often, thoughts you welcome easily. But deeper in, you sense doors that remain closed. You can't always say what's behind them. You only know not to turn the handle. Psychologists and philosophers have long noticed how consciousness quietly avoids certain thoughts, not always by deliberate choice, but through subtle, automatic closing of mental doors. These rooms are locked for safety, to protect you from what feels too overwhelming, confusing, or painful. You might recall moments when a memory or worry tried to surface, only to slip away before you could catch it. A sense of discomfort, an urge to look elsewhere, and the thought is gone, shut behind a door you barely noticed closing. Researchers studying trauma and memory have found that the mind often shields itself by tucking difficult experiences out of reach. Yet, what is hidden does not always disappear. Like ghosts, these forgotten feelings and memories linger in the quiet, shaping your choices from the shadows. Consider how even the most peaceful mind holds secrets, rooms kept locked by habit or fear. Sometimes, the act of locking the door is a kindness, a pause that gives you time to grow stronger. But over time, these closed spaces can fill with echoes. unanswered questions, silent worries, or strange dreams that slip in while you sleep. As you prepare to rest, imagine walking these corridors gently, without judgment. The locked doors do not mean failure or weakness. They are simply signs of what the mind was not ready to face. And if tonight you sense a ghostly presence at the edge of your thoughts, you can offer it patience, knowing that even locked doors are part of being human, and that one day, when you're ready, you may open them to let in the light. Imagine yourself adrift in a dream. You wander through unfamiliar streets, recognize faces you've never seen, or even find yourself speaking with a voice that isn't quite your own. In dreams, identity is as fluid as water. Sometimes you are yourself, sometimes a stranger, sometimes no one at all. Each night, consciousness steps into a new role, wearing memories and feelings that last only as long as the dream itself. This is the dream avatar paradox, the unsettling notion that the self you experience during waking life may also be a kind of dream, just more continuous and convincing. Each morning, you wake and slip back into your familiar story, believing it to be the real one. Yet in dreams, the same certainty arises, no matter how odd or impossible the events become. Philosophers and psychologists have long wondered if waking identity is just another avatar, a character consciousness inhabits for a while, shaped by habits, memories, and a thread of narrative woven day after day. In this view, the line between dreaming and waking grows soft and uncertain. Modern neuroscience finds no clear boundary either. The same networks that build the self in dreams help maintain it in waking life, piecing together sensations, emotions, and thoughts into a coherent story. When you dream, the brain doesn't pause its storytelling. It simply spins a different tale, often more flexible, sometimes more honest. Imagine yourself waking tomorrow, memories of a dream lingering at the edges of awareness, the roles you played, the emotions you felt, already slipping away. Yet for those brief moments, they were real, just as real as the person you now become when you open your eyes. Tonight, as you settle into darkness and your breath grows soft, consider that each self is a role, each story a dream, some lasting only minutes, others an entire lifetime. And perhaps, in the gentle space between sleep and waking, you glimpse the true mystery, that all you are is the story consciousness is dreaming right now. Imagine yourself standing before a vast hall lined with mirrors, each reflecting a different version of yourself. You may feel like one continuous person, growing older with time. But the Hall of Masks suggests something more fluid, that across the years you wear many selves, each one fading away as a new one takes its place. Consider how the person you were a year ago feels both familiar and distant. Memories belong to that past self, whose hopes, fears, and habits shaped a version of you now changed. As time passes, these selves don masks, some worn proudly, others hidden in shadow, appearing and disappearing like actors in an endless play. Imagine walking through a quiet gallery, the air thick with the scent of aged wood and fading paint. Each mask tells a story: childhood innocence, youthful ambition, the weariness of middle age. None remain forever. Instead, they pass through, layered upon one another, composing the complex tapestry you call identity. Philosophers have long debated whether the self is singular or many. Some traditions see identity as a river, constantly flowing, never quite the same from one moment to the next. Modern psychology echoes this, recognizing how personality evolves and fragments with experience. As you rest in this thought, you might feel a gentle acceptance. If you are many selves rather than one, then change is natural, and loss is part of becoming. You can watch each mask with curiosity and kindness, knowing that behind them all is the quiet space where presence endures beyond time. Imagine yourself savoring the first bite of a new fruit, its taste sharp and bright, a burst of sensation that fills your awareness. For a moment, everything else fades as your mind soaks up this novelty. But with each bite, the flavor dulls, and soon the excitement slips away. Some philosophers suggest that consciousness is drawn to novelty like a moth to light. The mind seeks out fresh experiences, vivid sensations, and new ideas, chasing after what feels unique. Old pleasures lose their power as attention drains them of their juice, leaving them flat and uninteresting. Consider how quickly a favorite song grows familiar, or how even the most beautiful view can fade into the background with repetition. Your awareness moves on, searching for something brighter, sharper, or different. It's as if the feeling of being alive is nothing more than consciousness hunting the next flavor, the next thrill. Imagine yourself looking back at your happiest memories. At the time, they were vibrant and full. Now, they're softened by time, their intensity worn away by retelling and recall. Consciousness, always restless, leaves behind what's known in favor of what's unknown, abandoning the old joys as soon as their sweetness is gone. Some traditions warn that this chase never ends. The mind tires of what it has, no matter how precious, always expecting fulfillment in the next experience. If so, you might wonder if life itself is only a loop of seeking, sampling, and moving on, a flavor-chasing awareness, forever thirsty. In this gentle reflection, you may find both longing and acceptance, that to be conscious is to crave the new, yet always return to the search once the juice of experience is spent. Imagine yourself sitting quietly, your breath gentle and slow. Behind your closed eyes, awareness glows, immediate, undeniable, and yet utterly mysterious. For all the knowledge gathered by science and philosophy, no one truly knows where consciousness comes from. It is as if every path of reason eventually ends at a blank wall, impossible to climb or see beyond. This is the wall of unknowing. Throughout history, seekers have tried to trace the roots of awareness, probing the brain, studying the mind, meditating for years in silence. Yet the more closely you look for the source, the further it seems to recede. Ancient mystics called this the groundless ground, a presence that cannot be dissected, only experienced. Some thinkers have suggested a radical shift. What if consciousness does not arise from anything else, not from matter, not from energy, not from the brain's machinery? What if it is the ground itself, the luminous field in which all other things appear? In this view, awareness isn't just another phenomenon to be explained, it is the foundation from which explanation itself emerges. Modern science still searches for the origin, mapping neural signals and building complex theories. But no experiment has ever revealed the spark that turns matter into mind. The source remains hidden, as if shielded by a wall that refuses to yield to logic or language. As you sit here, notice the simple fact of being aware. You do not need to know its source to rest in its presence. Let the mystery be gentle, not troubling, a soft, quiet wall that holds you in its shelter. Let your thoughts drift gently along this boundary. Sometimes it is enough just to wonder. Awareness itself may be the one thing that needs no explanation, because it is the place where all questions begin. Imagine yourself sitting quietly, your mind drifting over thoughts and memories. Some are welcome, easy to revisit. Others remain in the background, hidden, uncomfortable, perhaps a little strange. Yet even as you turn away from these shadows, they do not disappear. In their own way, they continue to think, feel, and influence you from beneath the surface. Psychologists have long explored the idea that consciousness is not a single, unified light, but a shifting landscape, where parts of the mind operate outside direct awareness. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the hidden self that carries what you ignore, deny, or suppress. Though you may pretend these parts aren't there, they quietly shape your reactions, your dreams, and your choices. You might recall moments when an unexpected feeling surged up, anger, fear, or longing you didn't know you carried. Or perhaps you've caught yourself acting in ways that surprise you, as if someone else briefly took the reins. These glimpses reveal that your shadow is not silent. It thinks its own thoughts, feels its own emotions, and sometimes whispers suggestions when you least expect it. Researchers studying unconscious processes have found that much of what you do is guided by patterns and motivations that never reach awareness. Your shadow self is a silent partner in the story of your life, sometimes protective, sometimes mischievous, always present. Consider that consciousness is not a bright spotlight but a shared space, divided between what you accept and what you avoid. The more you acknowledge the presence of your shadow, the less power it has to disrupt from the dark. As you prepare to rest, imagine welcoming the shadow as part of your wholeness. If tonight you sense a thought or feeling drifting in from the edges, you can let it stay, knowing that every mind holds both light and shadow, and both are needed to be fully awake. Imagine yourself sitting quietly, noticing the subtle drift of thoughts across your mind. Each moment feels linked to the next, creating the impression of a smooth, continuous self, someone steady, moving gently through the hours. But beneath this gentle narrative, something stranger is happening. This is the memory reboot loop, the idea that your sense of now is not truly seamless, but instead refreshed and rebuilt from moment to moment. Each second, the brain quietly reassembles your sense of identity, drawing from fragments of memory, emotion, and sensory detail. It's less like a single, unbroken file and more like a document being live edited, rewritten constantly, with no fixed master copy to return to. Neuroscientists have observed that the networks responsible for your sense of self are in a state of perpetual renewal. Your awareness doesn't replay the past perfectly, but reconstructs it each time, subtly adjusting and updating. Even your memory of what just happened is a new creation, woven together to fit the story your mind needs now. Imagine waking from a nap or losing track of time in a long day. Your now can shift suddenly, the past blurring at the edges as your awareness snaps into a new frame. In this sense, you are always beginning again, each moment a fresh composition, assembled from what remains and what you expect to come next. Psychologists sometimes describe consciousness as a buffer, holding only what's needed, discarding the rest, editing a self that is never exactly the same from one breath to the next. Tonight, as you rest in darkness and your thoughts grow quiet, consider the possibility that you are not a single, unchanging entity, but a story forever under revision. Your sense of self is a loop, a gentle reboot that allows you to keep moving forward, never locked in the past, but always refreshed for the future. And in this continuous process of renewal, perhaps you find a quiet freedom, the ability to begin anew, moment by moment, with each passing second. Imagine yourself sitting quietly, the soft light filtering gently through a window. You might feel a sense of wholeness, a container holding your thoughts, feelings, and memories tightly within. But the container that leaks suggests a different truth. Consciousness isn't a sealed vessel like a cup, but more like a sponge, porous, absorbing and releasing trauma, pain, love, and every experience that flows through you. Consider how emotions ebb and flow, slipping unexpectedly into your awareness. A sudden sadness, a burst of joy, a lingering ache from the past. They soak through you, shaping and reshaping the boundaries of yourself. This leaky nature means you're never truly isolated, but deeply connected to the currents around you. Imagine yourself resting by a quiet stream, dipping your fingers into the cool, flowing water. Like the sponge soaking up the river, your consciousness takes in impressions from the world, letting some pass through while holding others close. The boundaries between inside and outside blur, revealing a constant exchange rather than fixed limits. Throughout history, thinkers and mystics have recognized this porous quality of being. The self is less a fortress and more a living organism, flexible, vulnerable, and deeply responsive. Modern psychology also speaks of emotional permeability, the ways in which past wounds and present connections intermingle within the mind. As you let this idea settle, notice how it brings a soft tenderness. If consciousness is a sponge, you can gently release what no longer serves you, while allowing new feelings to enter. In this quiet openness, you rest not in isolation, but in the flow, a living presence, absorbing, leaking, and endlessly becoming. Imagine yourself sitting quietly, focusing on the sensation of your breath. You try to catch the present moment, hoping to experience it exactly as it is. Yet, even as you notice an inhale or the faint tick of a clock, the moment has already slipped past. Awareness is always just behind, like a narrator racing to keep up with a story already in motion. Some neuroscientists suggest that consciousness never truly meets the present. Signals from your senses must travel, be processed, stitched together, and only then do they emerge as your experience. By the time you become aware of a sound or a thought, the event itself is already history, milliseconds gone. Consider how strange this is. You reach for a cup of tea, and only as your hand closes around it, do you realize you've moved? The mind believes it's catching life as it happens, but it's always slightly late, retelling, not witnessing in real time. The now you trust is only a reconstruction, the mind's best guess about what just occurred. Imagine watching a sporting event on television with a slight delay. You see the goal after it's happened, but your excitement feels immediate. In much the same way, consciousness presents you with a version of the world that is already out of date, yet somehow convincing. This gentle lag is almost invisible, hidden behind the fluidity of thought. But in quiet moments, you might sense the truth. The present is always just out of reach, and consciousness is forever a breath behind. What you call now is only a fleeting echo, never quite real, always gently chasing the moment as it slips away. Imagine yourself walking quietly in a garden at dusk. In the fading light, you notice a bird turning its head, a cat watching from a distant wall, insects humming softly in the grass. Each creature moves with a subtle purpose, as if guided by an inner life you can't quite see. For centuries, humans have wondered where awareness begins and ends. What if consciousness is not just a human trait, but something much broader? A quiet presence running through the natural world. This idea is sometimes called the non-human awareness theory. It suggests that consciousness might exist in more forms than we can easily recognize. Animals dream, solve puzzles, grieve, and even plan for the future. Recent studies show that crows remember human faces, elephants mourn their dead, and dolphins call each other by name. Even more surprising, machines now predict outcomes, learn from experience, and adapt their responses. Some scientists have discovered that plants and fungi also communicate, sharing information about danger or resources through underground networks. The mycelium of mushrooms connects roots across entire forests, behaving almost like a nervous system. It raises a profound question. Where do we draw the line between life and awareness? Ancient traditions often imagined the world itself as alive. Rivers, trees, stones, and stars sharing in a slow, patient consciousness. Modern thinkers echo these possibilities, suggesting that awareness may be less about intelligence and more about connection, interaction, and response. As you sit here, notice the subtle aliveness around you, even in silence. Perhaps consciousness is not an exclusive human possession, but a thread woven through all things, visible or hidden. Let your mind rest gently in this idea. It is enough simply to wonder what other forms of awareness might share this world with you. Imagine yourself recalling an early memory, a family gathering, a classroom, or a familiar street. Listen to the stories you tell about yourself, who you are, what you like, how you see the world. Each detail seems personal, chosen by you. Yet, if you look more closely, you may notice that much of your story was written long before you understood the words. Psychologists and philosophers have observed that the self is not born fully formed. Instead, it is shaped by the voices that surround you, your culture, your parents, the countless influences that quietly script your beliefs and behaviors. As you grow, these influences blend with your own experiences, layering narrative upon narrative until you become the character you recognize as me. You might recall times when you felt out of place, as though you were acting in a story that didn't quite fit, or moments when you heard yourself repeat a phrase, a habit, or an expectation that was never truly your own. These are signs of the fictional self effect, the way consciousness becomes the narrator of a script authored by forces outside your control. Researchers studying identity have found that memory itself is a kind of storyteller, constantly rewriting details to fit a story that makes sense. Even your deepest convictions can shift with the opinions of others, the weight of tradition, or the simple desire to belong. Consider that consciousness may not be the author, but the voice reading the lines, narrating your life as it unfolds, sometimes with confidence, sometimes with doubt. The story changes as new chapters are written, but the narrator always carries the sound of inherited scripts. As you prepare to rest, reflect on the gentle possibility that your story is not fixed. If tonight you notice a line or belief that no longer feels true, you can let it go, knowing that even the most familiar character can grow beyond the pages written by others. Imagine yourself sitting quietly in a dim room, the world hushed and still. You close your eyes and turn your attention inward. At first, you hear the faint background of your own breath, the subtle hum of distant life. Then, with gentle focus, you begin to notice the soft rhythm of your heart, a steady pulse, rising and falling like a bell struck by an invisible hand. In moments of meditation, each heartbeat becomes an anchor. Your thoughts slow, drifting to the edges, and what remains is a simple, honest awareness. You are not planning, remembering, or reaching for words. You are only listening, following the beat that has accompanied you since before you could remember. This is the quiet mystery of the heartbeat observer, the possibility that consciousness is most real, not when it fills the air with talk, but when it pauses to listen. Philosophers and contemplatives have long described awareness as a receptive presence, a silent witness rather than a constant commentator. In these moments of listening, the boundary between self and world softens, and you sense the simple fact of being alive. Neuroscientists have begun to study how awareness shifts during meditation. Brain scans show that activity in areas linked to narrative and language fades, while regions devoted to bodily sensation and presence become brighter. It's as if, in listening to the body's quiet music, you step closer to consciousness itself. Imagine yourself now, heart pulsing gently in the darkness, your breath calm and slow. You are neither the thoughts that come nor the stories they weave, but the quiet observer, present, attentive, patient. Tonight, as you rest, let each heartbeat sound like a bell. In the stillness, you may discover that awareness is deepest when it is listening, not speaking, a silent companion marking the simple wonder of being here, right now. Imagine yourself resting in a quiet room, the soft hum of stillness wrapping around you like a gentle breeze. You might feel your consciousness as a solid personal presence, the unmistakable center of your experience. But the background awareness field suggests a different vision. That awareness is a vast, shared ocean, and you are merely a ripple within it. Consider how a single drop disturbs the surface of a calm lake. The ripple rises, dances briefly, then fades back into the whole. In much the same way, your individual consciousness could be a temporary pattern arising within a larger, unified field of awareness, one that is not confined to any single body or mind. Imagine yourself walking barefoot on soft grass at dawn, feeling the earth cool beneath your feet. The sensations you experience are vivid, but they may be currents in a broader stream of consciousness flowing beneath and through all things. You do not own this field. Rather, it borrows your shape for a time, expressing itself in your unique form. Throughout history, many spiritual traditions have spoken of a universal mind or cosmic consciousness, an underlying reality that transcends individuality. Modern physics and philosophy also explore ideas of interconnectedness, suggesting that what we call self may be a fleeting configuration within an immense, timeless awareness. As this thought settles in, you might feel a gentle loosening of the grip on personal identity, If consciousness is a shared field, and you are but a ripple, then you are both unique and intimately connected, part of a vast, ongoing dance of being. In this quiet knowing, you can simply rest, flowing with the rhythm of the greater whole. Imagine yourself lying beneath a vast night sky, the stars scattered and silent above. For a moment, you wonder what it means to be conscious within such a limitless expanse. Some ancient philosophers and modern scientists have suggested a radical possibility that you are not separate from the universe, but the product of its dreaming. What if the cosmos itself is in a kind of slumber, and your awareness is a fragment of its restless mind? In this view, consciousness is not confined to any one being, but is spacetime's way of experiencing itself from the inside, moment by moment, life by life. Consider how dreams work. Within them, you invent worlds, characters, and stories, believing in their reality until the dream dissolves. So too, perhaps, does the universe generate individual awareness, each of us a fleeting vision, convinced of our independence, while truly rooted in something vaster. You might imagine the galaxies, the atoms, and every heartbeat as threads woven together into a single dream tapestry. Your memories, your fears, your joys are not isolated. They are the universe reflecting on its own complexity, quietly seeking understanding through countless forms. In this perspective, there is a gentle humility. The sense of I becomes less about personal identity and more about being a brief ripple in a cosmic sea. You are not outside the universe looking in. You are the universe looking at itself, quietly amazed by what it finds. Perhaps, in the stillness of the night, you glimpse the truth that all of existence is dreaming itself awake, and you are the dream it remembers. Imagine yourself resting in quiet, your breath slow and steady. Even in stillness, your mind is rarely silent. Thoughts drift in and out, some gentle, others persistent. Sometimes one thought lingers and loops, returning again and again, reshaping itself into new questions or worries. For many philosophers, this endless repetition is not a flaw, but a clue. What if consciousness is simply the thought that won't stop? This idea suggests that identity, the sense of I, might emerge from mental momentum. Each moment, the mind repeats its patterns, memories, hopes, judgments, so often that the rhythm feels permanent. Over time, this steady pulse of thought forms a kind of echo chamber, a place where awareness circles endlessly, convinced of its own reality. Ancient traditions describe this as the stream of consciousness, a ceaseless flow of mental activity. In meditation, practitioners learn to watch thoughts arise and fall, noticing how certain ones cling tightly, fueling new cycles. Modern neuroscience observes similar patterns in the brain, loops of neural activity that reinforce themselves, building habits of perception and belief. Imagine for a moment that you are not a single unchanging self, but the result of these repeating loops, thoughts chasing thoughts, gaining strength with each pass. The sense of being you could be the story that repetition weaves, a thought echoed so many times it grows roots and blossoms into a lasting presence. As you rest here, notice the gentle return of familiar thoughts. Let them drift by without resistance. You don't need to break the loop tonight. Sometimes, just observing the rhythm is enough, a soft awareness that sees momentum without being swept away. Rest calmly in this idea. Consciousness may be nothing more and nothing less than the thought that refuses to end. Imagine yourself walking through an ordinary day. The world feels stable, solid ground beneath your feet, familiar shapes and colors around you. Yet sometimes, a strange sensation arises. For a brief moment, everything feels unreal, as if you're seeing life through a pane of glass or standing inside someone else's memory. These episodes are fleeting, but they leave a quiet question behind. What if reality itself isn't as seamless as it appears? Some philosophers and scientists have wondered whether consciousness is not a natural product of matter, but a glitch, a tiny flaw in the universe's perfect blindness. Matter moves and collides, following the laws of physics with no awareness. But then, for reasons no one fully understands, a flash of experience appears, a fragment of knowing that wasn't supposed to exist. You might recall moments when the world around you lost its usual clarity. A familiar room felt unfamiliar, or your own hands seemed like objects belonging to someone else. In those times, consciousness stands apart, a brief spark of observation that doesn't quite fit the pattern. Researchers studying dissociation and altered states have found that these glitches often happen in moments of stress or fatigue. The brain, overwhelmed by signals, seems to step back and watch itself from a distance. The effect is unsettling, but it may also be a clue to how awareness arises from the fabric of the world. Consider that in a universe ruled by unfeeling matter, consciousness is a gentle disruption, a gap in the system, a question that never fully closes. As you prepare to rest, you can let yourself drift into that possibility, that the feeling of unreality is not a problem to fix, but a quiet invitation to wonder. And if tonight you sense the world growing strange, you can simply observe it, knowing that the glitch is part of the mystery that makes experience possible. Imagine yourself alone with a quiet question at the end of the day. The room is soft with dusk, and your mind drifts through memories, hopes, and half-formed ideas. There is one puzzle you cannot quite lay to rest, a riddle as old as human thought. What is consciousness? You search for words, for clear definitions, for evidence you can point to, but every answer seems to slip away, dissolving before it can be pinned down. Consciousness is the experience behind your eyes, the feeling of being here, now, alive. And yet, try to capture it, and it vanishes like breath on a mirror. Philosophers have wrestled with this question for centuries. Some compare consciousness to a light that illuminates all things but cannot shine on itself. Others call it the hard problem, the fact that no matter how much we explain about the brain, sensation, or behavior, there is always something left over, something unmeasured and unprovable. Neuroscientists map activity across the brain, hoping to find the source. Yet awareness is not a single spot or signal, but a field of experience that no scan can truly reveal. Even when you study your own thoughts, you remain on the surface, never able to look behind the mirror to see what is watching. Imagine yourself now, sitting quietly in the darkness, your breath gentle, the world settling around you. The question remains, persistent and unsolved. What is this presence that looks out, that asks, that listens? Perhaps it is the only true mystery left, the final unanswered riddle. And in not knowing, in simply holding the question, you share something with every mind that has ever wondered. Tonight, let the question rest beside you, a companion in the dark, a mirror you can never see behind, reflecting the endless wonder of simply being aware.